programmer.
I forgot how to write. It's hard.
Well, since I'm not teaching anymore,
Hey, how are you,
my
Jackson?
handwriting is just gone. Because I used to write.
Handwriting.
I
Well, I
know.
was gonna say, at least I can write in cursive,
Well,
I know how to do that.
I can do it.
You can't read it. You can't read it. But I can write it.
I just
Oh,
wanted
what's
to
up?
go up to like every time I thought about doing it, it was like either too early, too late, and then during the time I could do it. But
A lot
I
of
did
cars
ask
in the
around.
township lot today, but I was here earlier and it was packed out.
Right.
So when I
Usually,
rolled up tonight, I was like, oh.
I'm not always right with situations like that, but this one.
Yeah, we'll keep it in mind.
We still need to have somebody with.
We're down one.
Yeah.
Like the dashboard said, it's 83 degrees outside, and I said, it's pretty cold outside.
I got in my car and I was like sweating. It's like I have shorts on.
Yeah, my puppy is furry and she's black. She's like panting if there's no tomorrow. So she.
Hey man, bring it up during conversation if you want.
Had enough to do. Enough.
Light reflects on that clock.
Yeah,
right
the
at
clock.
bottom.
Yes, sir. The clock is very hard to read from that chair. We got about 2 more minutes.
That's what I thought.
Good job. The aim on the YouTube.
Make a point about that.
So YouTube is being done differently on planning commission nights, just not on BZA nights, so sorry about
Just
that
wanted to
last
make sure
night.
you knew.
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks
this
for
on the site.
heads up.
There are 2 driveways going this way, and there is a central driveway. The central driveway is for cars only. These 2 are meant for trucks also. This is
This
FedEx.
camera,
Yeah.
the clock
And this
over
is
here,
1.
It's
So
light reflects right on it.
Heads up.
Probably got another minute.
And I guess for camping world too, I put some slides together that just kind of follow your
I
comments.
usually have my cell phone here, but I didn't bring it.
I don't bring it in. I'm afraid it's gonna go off.
My driver never got put in though, right? Is it in there? I can't. Is it there?
it's there.
I'm always proud when I
Otherwise,
remember
if
to
this
put it into
driveway is
do
not
not
in there,
disturb
this distance
airplane
is
mode
way too
before the meeting starts,
Okay.
rather than
So they
halfway
do
through.
have this, and this is for in and out, and it's strictly designed for cars only.
That's me,
So
when you
these 2
see
are
me do
meant
this,
for trucks.
that's because
We're
I
not
forgot to
changing
turn
any
off
access.
vibrate.
And you got the shot.
Passengers. Make it waterproof, there's nothing.
Pavlovian response, remember do not disturb.
Automotive traffic is going to be exactly during work hours or shift change hours, so you're going to have a cluster.
What does that say the time is? 5:20. 5:29. See, it's on the corner there.
Welcome to the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, April 12th, 2023. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would all rise, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now if we could have a roll call, please.
Medina Atchison,
Here.
Bernie Grant,
Here.
Sherry Budd, Jackson Paul, Jeff Jar, Brian Cullen.
Here. And we have an agenda before us. Could I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
We have a motion and a support to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? And then we have the minutes. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
Through the chair,
Yes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the regular meeting of March 22nd, 2023, as presented.
Support.
With a motion and support, all in favor signify by aye. And the motion carries. We move ahead now. Do we have any, with no correspondence or public hearing, we are on old business. Item 1, case 23-008, Chips All Gone at the Belleville Square temporary land use. The applicant, Peter Burgard, is requesting a temporary land use permit to conduct a temporary windshield glass repair use. The location is at 10972 Belleville Road, which is located on parcel ID number 830649900037707. This site is located in the Belleville Square Shopping Plaza, parking lot on the west side of Belleville Road between the North Interstate 94 Service Drive and Westlake Circle. First off, we'll start with a presentation by staff. Director Powers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Following the meeting on March 22nd, there were a number of requests for additional information, and I'd like to go over some of the basics of this request, but the request scope was presented at the previous meeting, so I won't go into too much detail on that, but I'd like to summarize the request and the nature of the Planning Commission's review based on the zoning ordinance requirements for temporary land uses, summarize some of the comments that we received from different consultants, staff, and from the applicant and his representative being the landowner, and to kind of summarize all the different recommendations together and then present a review path for the Planning Commission before you hear further from the applicant, before you make your decision. So again, I'll just restate some of the basics of the case. As the chair mentioned, applicant Peter Burgard has applied seeking a temporary land use permit for a tent service use involving minor automotive glass repair at the Belleville Square Shopping Plaza. Per the zoning ordinance, temporary uses that operate for more than 7 consecutive days require Planning Commission approval. We went into more detail at the previous meeting about the definition of the use being a sort of temporary minor vehicle service use. As a permanent land use, it would require a special land use permit. But there's nothing in the zoning ordinance preventing somebody from pursuing such a use as a temporary land use. For temporary land use reviews, the Planning Commission is tasked with reviewing a number of criteria from section 7.120C of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance, which includes 16 items, which I will just mention what those items are, and I won't go into analysis on those items with my comments tonight. But the Planning Commission is tasked with reviewing adequacy of parking and access, adequate drainage, compatibility with surrounding land uses, size, height, and type of construction of the proposed buildings and structures in relation to the surrounding site, sufficient setbacks from road rights of way and lot lines, adequate utilities, trash disposal and site cleanup, sanitary facilities, hours of operation, outdoor lighting and signage, other license and permit requirements, potential noise, odor, dust, and glare, fire lanes, fire protection and security, off-site impacts of traffic volumes, the necessity of performance bonds to ensure prompt removal, and other concerns which may impact the public health, safety, or general welfare. At the meeting on March 22nd, after reviewing the request, the Planning Commission stated concerns regarding issues involving the location of the proposed tent that accommodates this use, the aesthetics, potential impacts on site tenants, and the timeframe of the tent installation. At the time, the Planning Commission requested that additional feedback should be gathered from the township's Downtown Development Authority Director, Mary Coburn, and that the applicant should state the minimum feasible timeframe that they would require for the use to be economically viable. The township's planning consultant was also requested to review and provide comment on the request. And based on the request from the Planning Commission, this packet now includes some additional materials in comparison with what they reviewed on March 22nd, including the original application filed by Mr. Burgard, an email to Mr. Burgard with a summary of the concern areas from myself dated March 30th, a memo from the Van Buren Township Planning Consultant and McKenna Senior Principal Planner, Vidya Krishnan, dated April 2nd, a memo from the Van Buren Township DDA Executive Director, Mary Coburn, dated April 4th, and a letter from landowner Mark Canvasser, dated April 5th. The original application materials also included a project narrative, some statements on the environmental impact and benefit of the chip repair process, sample image from an active chips all gone site, which is up on the screen, proposed site plan, a peddler's license, and a lease agreement. Before I get into my recommendation, which is more of a procedural recommendation, I will summarize some of the statements and findings from some of the other submittals that you received prior to this meeting. So I'll kind of come back to my overarching comments at the end here. As I mentioned, our planning consultant, Ms. Krishnan, provided a report. It goes into detail on the different criteria under section 7.120C of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. I will not summarize those findings in detail. I would encourage you to reference those throughout tonight's meeting. But based on some of the concern areas around aesthetics and impacts of having a long-term temporary land use at this location and consequences that may set precedent for similar land uses to set up and potential in relationship to some of the longer standing businesses in the district. Our planning consultant had a recommendation at the end of the report that said that based on and I'm just going to quote, based on our review of the proposal, we do not believe that the proposed use is a temporary use if the intent is to operate it for 6 to 9 months. The consequences of the precedent set by such approval can be detrimental to the township's goal for creating a vibrant and well-designed major commercial corridor. Therefore, we recommend that the Planning Commission consider approval of the proposed chips all gone temporary land use for a period of 6 weekends, which may or may not be consecutive, but not to exceed a total of 14 days in the calendar year. So just summarizing the recommendation from that report. I'd like to move on to the findings and recommendations of the memo provided by DDA Director Mary Coburn. And I'll just read some of the bullet points from that memo dated April 4th, which is also in your packet, page 21. I respectfully submit these comments as requested from the Van Buren Township Planning Commission, stated at their regular meeting. And the bullet points are as follows. Relocating the tent to the far south side of the parking lot to avoid obstruction. And that's the, excuse the interruption here, but I just wanted to point out that Director Coburn did put a map together that shows kind of an ideal location according to minimal conflict with nearby businesses and minimal conflict with traffic safety concerns. So this bullet point relates to the image on the screen. So relocating the tent to the far south side of the parking lot to avoid obstruction of site view to the businesses, business storefronts in the plaza. See the map attachment. Placement of the tent a minimum of 40 feet or 4 parking spaces west of the landscape island to keep the line of sight clear for those trying to pull onto the cut-through driveway that runs east and west through the plaza. So if you can see, there's a separation distance on that image that pulls the tent back from, or the site back from the landscaping island. That the DDA would be comfortable with the use of a 10 by 10 pop-up tent in order to reduce the need for additional aesthetic improvements for a duration of no more than 3 months in place of the original proposed 20 by 20 with 8-foot extension peak, as well as an alternative option instead of the large blue barrels for the tent to be weighted down to prevent blowovers. To provide proof that tents meet the requirements of CPA I-84 and is flame retardant, so that pertains to flammability, and to provide notification to the plaza tenants of the requested temporary land use. And I'll now go into summarizing the letter from the owner of the property, and I know the owner is here tonight, as well as many of the tenants of Belleville Square Shopping Plaza, so I'll certainly defer any elaboration on these comments to Mr. Canvasser, but I'll just summarize that the letter dated April 5th mentions some of the business history of this site development, zeroes in on some of the economic climate that has faced this site in the past 3 years and the uncertainty of the current economic climate, challenges faced by retailers, in mentioning that this is the first time that there has been a vacancy of 25% with 2 or more tenants that have indicated they cannot stay in business past the end of this year. The summary request from this letter is to state that the applicant is willing to move his location from the front of the main driveway, but the decrease in visibility makes the necessity of having a tent ever more important for the success of his business. And the other request is that pertaining to the reduced time frame, the applicant is willing to run his business for a 3 to 4 month period instead of 6 months. It does mention that Peter's employees need to make what's stated as a living wage, which occurs when the business operates full-time. Opening for only weekends for a short period of time does not allow Peter to attract employees who want to work for only 2 days of wages. So you have some different comments that both speak to some of the concern areas of the Planning Commission, comments in detail from our planning consultant who's here tonight. I'm sure is able to answer any questions from myself in an email following the meeting, and comments from our DDA director in addition to the comments from the applicant. My recommendation is to open this up for discussion, to have the applicant present their case as revised. I would recommend a couple of items that I do support the recommendations of the planning consultant's letter and the DDA director's letter. Specific to the establishment of time frame, there's some discretion there that the Planning Commission has, and I would encourage you to zero in on that point if the Planning Commission is inclined to move forward with any kind of an approval. I would recommend that the Planning Commission should restrict the time frame as recommended by the planning consultant, a maximum of 6 weekends, not to exceed a total of 14 days, except that a longer time frame may be considered if all of the following criteria are met: that the applicant has demonstrated a need for a greater length of time for viability of the use on the site, as demonstrated by the applicant, that the aesthetic impact of this operation is sufficiently limited so as to not cause concern that if a different business of a similar aesthetic impact could be justified in a similar site for a similar period of time, that the location is adequate based on findings that it does not impair or impact driver safety and does not negatively impact the visibility of area businesses, and any other factors that the Planning Commission sees as relevant to making a decision on an expanded time frame. So that's just some parameters I would recommend you consider if you are considering a time frame beyond the 6 weekends stated in the planning consultant's report. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions about my updated cover memo, and I encourage you to hear from the applicant tonight as well.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr.
Krishnan.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Director Power summarized what the findings were. After the last meeting, the commission had asked me to provide a planner's perspective of what this use does, not the use by itself, which is a pretty regular type of use. What are the ramifications of what you're considering approval for the time frame that is being proposed? So my memo summarizes what my stance on the project is.
Okay, could we hear from the applicant?
My name is Peter Burgeye with Chips All Gone. Can I just ask, what did that mean that what you just said? What was your response?
If I may?
Yes.
I said the Planning Commission had requested a written report from me with a planner's perspective, and from a planner's perspective, the use is fine, but my analysis refers to what are the ramifications for allowing a temporary use with this time frame. What does it does for the longer planning consequences? That's what my letter summarizes.
Okay. And in some of the notes going back and forth, I thought you said that you checked to see if it was being done anywhere else. And we did it 2 years ago at Briarwood Mall, and I have the city permit with me. For the last, when Arborland was sold 6 or 7 years ago, there was a new chip place that moved in there day one, and they've been there for the last 6, 7 years in Ann Arbor at Arborland for the whole summer. And it didn't stop people from doing brick and mortars. People still do brick and mortar businesses in Ann Arbor. Some of those are the ramifications you're talking about, right?
I'm sorry, I don't engage in a dialogue. You can present to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission can make the
Okay.
determination.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking a look at this. We've been doing it 14 years, and it's been very win-win. People love it. We went and talked to the store owners at the mall, and we got great response from them. It will bring more business in, not like maybe $10 million worth, but it's activity. And we'd like it to go on an upswing rather than on a downswing like your Rawsonville Mall. That one doesn't have too much activity at all. It might be running at 10 or 20%, maybe? Are you familiar? Yeah. So, and the other thing I'd have to say is, we've got aesthetics. I'm all for that. It has to be a win-win. It has to look good. It has to be run professionally to get good, positive for everybody involved. And I think we've been doing that for 14 years. We give 100% lifetime warranty on our work. We take care of every client very well, and as well as the store owners around us. I really appreciate your time, and I do have the owner of the mall here too to talk. Do you have questions for me?
We have at this point Planning Commission discussion.
I would like to ask the applicant some questions.
Sure.
Mr. Burgard, where are you doing this service right now other than, well, obviously not in Van Buren Township? Where else are you doing it?
We were at Briarwood 2 years ago. We're not there right now. They chose to move us at different locations, and they keep changing. We were there during COVID. It just didn't have a lot of traffic at that time. Last summer, we were at Toledo Mall, Franklin Park Mall. We'll probably be back this summer. We've done it in Adrian, and we've done it in Illinois at Cherryvale Mall. That was a few years back. But there's something else, but that's about it.
vehicles do you see on a daily basis where you repair
Maybe 10 to 20.
in that span of 9 a.m. to, or I think your hours you wanted originally was 8 a.m. to what, 9 p.m.?
Yeah, something like that.
And you saw how many vehicles?
Between 10 and 20 maybe, and then sometimes 30.
Depending on the day, maybe?
Yeah,
Day more?
Saturdays, but Saturdays are good if the weather's okay. And it's not feasible for us to do the weekend thing at all, just time, money, and energy. If you try to do 4 or 5 weekends, 6 weekends, you're going to get people that can't work. You're going to get bad weather. You gotta play all the days. And yeah, so when Mondays and Tuesdays are the slowest days for pizza and hair. People close down their businesses on Monday and Tuesday. Fridays, Saturdays are busy for pizza. When you need to save $500 from getting a brand new windshield, any time is a great time. That's why I said we've done it at 10, 11 o'clock at night with no lights, because people kept coming. And that was at the previous meeting. So it's fun. It's good helping people and saving them money.
Your sign indicates that it's free. Can you please explain how the customer obtains this free service? 'Cause
Right, so-
in my world, nothing is free.
That's right. And you've seen the Safe Light commercials where they go to pay the money and Safe Light goes, oh, no, you don't have to pay any money. So it's free to the customer with full coverage insurance. Most all the insurance companies waive your deductible, and we tell them that up front, and it's on the sign through most insurance companies. So
You submit the paperwork to their insurance company.
they call in right then and there to their insurance company, or they can do it on their smartphone, and it's all processed right then and there, all up front. They're processing it. Why do all the insurance companies do it? Because it saves them a ton of money. They'd rather pay pennies on the dollar. Some windshields cost $550, $750, and over $1,000. A Mini Cooper can go up to $1,200 for a windshield. And we can fix it in 10, 15 minutes. We can do the 10 by 10 tent. We can't do the 4 to 6 weekends. We will bring value, and we'll make it win-win so we can continue with you guys.
Through the chair, I would just like to make my comments about my experience with windshields. This past week, we incurred a chip on an F-150 that was being transported, okay? And I know this has nothing to do with our ordinances and what we allow in the community and what we don't. But it costs us $2,000 to have that F-150's windshield repaired. If you read the packet, you'll indicate in here that the windshields cannot be put in landfills, or they're thrown into landfills and they cannot degrade because of all of the components now that are within the windshield that have to be calibrated. It's a long process. So your service is wonderful. I have a chip right now I'd like to get fixed because I don't want it to spread, and I don't want to pay for a new windshield in my own personal vehicle. With that being said, I love what you're offering our community, and it saddens me that we can't just say, yes, come here, be here for 9 months. The thing that I just want to put on the Planning Commission is this is something we've never had in our community, and I would like to bring it. Yes, and to bring the traffic to the Belleville Square, to hopefully get those businesses more foot traffic as well. I don't know how long it takes, if I can go get my nails done while my windshield is getting fixed, or go shopping at the health food store, but I would like that traffic. I love all of that. With that being said, currently our ordinance, and maybe this has to do with the B-Rod, we can have as many fireworks people with tents because of the duration. But we can't have a service that doesn't create pollution. I personally hate fireworks. I hate the noise. My dogs are scared. And we have them everywhere. We have them in a lot of places. But this is the first time we've had this sort of service that we could be bringing to our community. So that is all my comments for now.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
To be recognized. May I ask a question?
Sure.
You mentioned they, when you said they moved us. Who is they?
Oh, Briarwood?
I don't know if it's Briarwood or is it your company that moved you? Because you keep talking about moving around locations.
Right. The company did.
So you're not are you the owner of the company or are you just,
I'm one of them, yeah.
so where's the main company located?
Br-
And so then I'd like to make a comment. I appreciate what you're trying to do for the people and repair and maybe save costs. But the one thing that we do have to do is we have to operate within the ordinance and what's written in the ordinance and the letter of it. So, I mean, as much as we would like something to occur, in my opinion, we have to stand by the interpretations of what's in writing of the experts that actually, we pay to interpret our ordinances. So I think we need to remember that as well. But I mean, in the end, I do understand why it makes some sense to have that in the community. My other question would be is, why doesn't it happen in the wintertime and, in the worst time of the year? Because there's a lot of people that, break windows then too, so.
Yep. Oh, no, and I appreciate that. We're doing a pretty due diligence job together, you guys all and me. This is 6 months we've been working on this, okay? So it's not like we're making any hasty decisions here. And I mean, the statistics for fireworks is that we all approved it. I've sat for 4 meetings and two companies get approved for do fireworks. It's over 11,500 people got hurt last year and over 9 people died. And that's a part of it too. But we don't like the way the tent looks. Okay, so we'll go down to the 10 by 10 foot tent and make it look prettier. I mean, something like that. But that's something else to weigh. We're in here weighing everything about, we don't want to have something look a little ugly, but did we consider, people getting their hand and fingers blown off?
I need to, Mr. Chairman, I do need to interject at this point. That's not an apples to apples comparison. Fireworks tents are regulated by state law. We do not have a choice. Most municipalities said they do not want fireworks, and the state legislation passed a law that said you do not have a choice. You have to allow it. And that's why we wrote an ordinance that allows fireworks as a temporary use. It's not out of a desire to see fireworks tents everywhere. We simply don't have that choice because the state took it out of our hand. So it's not an even comparison. So just, we need to remember that.
Chair, so I need to ask this question. So is that what we talk about as unforeseen circumstance? Is that where we plan something and then the effect was something else? So our community could potentially not receive the service that Chips All Be Gone provides.
The duration for which the gentleman is proposing the use is unusual, but if this is something the Planning Commission would like to consider, including all the ramifications that it might have, you can actually amend your ordinance to allow for uses such as this, so that it is planned, it is thought out, so that this gentleman might operate a ship-shape perfect business. He's going to be there, he's going to provide the service and go away. There is no guarantee the next person who comes with the same type of request is going to do the same. So you've got to look at the next person also. I'm sure he's going to operate it well because he's done this so many times before. So if this is something the township would like, then revisiting the ordinance is a good idea. You put it down so that you're setting a standard so that for this gentleman, next time he doesn't have to work 5 months to try and figure out what would be acceptable to us. So you're right, sometimes these things come up, and that is, the pandemic, if anything, has shown us that a lot of different types of uses have come since then. The to-go windows in restaurants. We never used to have to-go windows in Applebee's and places like that. That's become a thing since the pandemic. So uses have evolved. This is one such use, a longer duration temporary use. If this is something you would like to allow, it's good to consider where would you like to allow it, how would you like it to look, and what types of uses would you allow under the spectrum for a larger temporary use. And that would be fine, but right now we don't have that.
Through the chair, I would like to ask staff a question. Just give me a second here. Alrighty, we have a letter from Mary Colburn. She's the DDA director. She's new. Did she just put this together as what her thoughts were, Dan?
Yes.
Okay.
This was in response to the request to weigh in on this. So I had met with Director Colburn and discussed the case and they had been given some of the information the whole time, but they weren't specifically asked to review it until this last few weeks.
Is she here in the audience?
No, I offered that I would present her letter in the packet and summarize her comments.
Okay, I
But
was
she
just,
did say she could be available if we wanted to text her and have her weigh in on the Zoom.
so she suggested in the third bullet 3 months, and then I just was wondering if she has worked with this sort of service before in her previous community, and if the DDA itself had voted on any of the information contained in here, because I don't know how the DDA works. I know that the more businesses that are in the community, the better off she is. So I know that she would want the businesses here to have this service.
So there's no authority or responsibility that the DDA has to actually take action on development projects typically. So the DDA wasn't requested to make a formal vote on this matter, but just based on some of the comments from the last meeting, the Planning Commission had sought her input as the director, so that's why that letter's in there.
It doesn't indicate like if it could be 3 months consecutively or, so I just am thinking that she just said 3 months and it could be 3 months every day.
From my discussions with Director Coburn, that reflects a roughly equivalent timeframe to what's being proposed as a consecutive 3 months. And I should mention also that I've also briefed former director Susan Ireland, who participates on an occasional basis with DDA matters still.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Through the chair, may I ask a question to Planner Vidya? And I'll paraphrase a little bit. I've been through a process where an overlay district has been applied to a project of mine very strictly. So I'm wondering, how does the Belleville Road Overlay District apply to this use?
The Belleville Road Overlay District is a corridor that extends all the way from Ecorse Road down till few businesses down I-94 South Service Drive. And that entire corridor is deemed as the township's premier commercial corridor. And it has attracted businesses that you would find everywhere. I mean, all the restaurant chains, which typically do big business, big volume business. It has attracted, and when the Belleville Road Overlay District was designed, it was designed in a manner so that you attract those businesses, because when there are larger companies, just for example, I throw out like Starbucks. When Starbucks does its review to see where they can be located, where do they have the market, they analyze a lot of factors go into there. I'm sure that the people who do retail know better than me just how much analysis goes into trying to determine whether a location is suitable for you to put your business in, so there is a return on investment. So the corridor, when it was established, there was a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission, and finally the board adopted. The district had really high standards for architecture, the uses that come in, and those standards were applied to everything from the little Jiffy Lube that's going in front of, it's a really small building, Jiffy Lube that's going in front of Meyer in one of the outlots all the way to Menards. I mean, Menards, it's huge, but they had to follow through on every bit of the ordinance. We did have some people who did ask for deviation, such as the Clover Senior Housing Development, and their argument was you can't even see us from the road because we're going to be keeping all the trees in front. But the Zoning Board of Appeals was very clear. Once you deviate from the standards of the corridor, it's a slippery slope down all the way. So we are going to hold on to the architecture that is designed for this corridor. So that's why the B-Rod was designed, and the standards in it for building architecture, landscaping, et cetera, are much higher than anywhere else in our township, which is what has created the premier corridor it is.
Does this violate that?
The B-Rod does not technically address temporary land uses. It talks only about permanent land uses, and there, once again, is a gap over there. It wasn't anticipated to have larger duration. You know, the fireworks ordinance came and we didn't have a say in it. They asked permission for 2 weeks, we have to allow it. So we allow it. But otherwise, gentlemen, is the first different type of use than a fireworks tent that has come through. And we realized the B-Rod did not account for temporary use. It spoke only of all the permanent uses that would go in. So,
Bernie?
I think that answers my question.
Through the chair, sorry. I might just also mention, there have been maybe just one. I know there's been at least one mobile food vendor or food truck, but that's kind of, again, a different kind of use as well. That's not really a structure. It's more of a.
and that's a peddler's license. It's
yes.
different than a temporary land use. That's the whole, that comes under the Code of Ordinances section. So it's subject to different rules.
Through the chair, I guess my comment would be, knowing the B-Rod is out there and we've expected brick on our buildings, we've expected trash cans that are built a certain way with stone and rock. So we've got bike racks, we've got benches, we've got areas where there's grass where people can enjoy. And I do believe that a tent in the B-Rod district does not make Van Buren a premier community. Not that your business is wrong, but I don't think it fits in a tent in that area, mainly because what it opens up to other people to do in tents, and I don't think that's what I want to look at when I go down through that part of Belleville Road.
Through the chair? Oh,
Please go ahead.
no, you haven't spoken. Go ahead.
Which is strange. Mr. Chair, I'd ask the applicant, has he considered renting a vacant storefront for his building?
Yeah, that's the first thing Dan asked me, and it doesn't work.
Okay. I would inquire if staff knows off the top of their head, I'm sorry, but the top of their head question, when was the B-Rod first ratified, when we'd bring it into the code? How long ago, roughly?
Want me to try?
I'm
So through-
sorry, guys.
Yeah, Chair, no, that's okay. This is a good question. I was speaking with the chair about this. It appears that it was after the passage of the 2010 Belleville Road Market Analysis and Study and before 2016. I don't have an exact date, but sometime in the past 15 years. Does that sound?
Yes, it's
accurate?
pre-2015, that much I know. There was an E-Rod district, Ecorse Haggerty Road overlay, and a B-Rod, so I often get them too many rods, so a little confusing. So I won't put a date on it, but it's pre-2016. It's been there for a while.
And through the chair, I think it also got started, I mean, the DDA was already started, the district, but because it outlined that district, and that was when the conversation was, that would be our main thoroughfare through the township, that because we don't have like a downtown area, but that would create a businesses that we thought would be, and that's why we were very careful what they built, what the colors were, not necessarily, but all the extra aesthetics that we asked for businesses to put in.
And so then for 15 years, we've really been upholding that standard. Towing the line pretty hard on that standard. That's not to say that maybe it's time to maybe go back and look at that standard. I mean, we've had a global pandemic, we've had uses that have come up in the last 15 years that we aren't, we aren't prepared for a tent like this. Is the first time someone's asked for it in my memory. It might be worth considering looking at our B-Rod to see if there's anything we've learned in the last 15 years that could be amending, that we could amend it with. That said, I do have some statements on this use. I do agree with the consultant that this would have to be a very temporary use in this zone. I'm afraid with the consultant's input and the input that I've heard from the rest of the commissioners, it would need to be very temporary and outside of what you believe would be a viable business for you. That said, I have another concern, and maybe it's procedural, maybe it's not, but this is being presented to us as a temporary land use. Minor automotive repair is a special land use when it's permanent in this district. And I know that staff looked at our ordinances and didn't find anything that would prevent us from granting a special land use exception along with a temporary, but I don't think we found anything that specifically allowed us to do it either. And I don't want to start a precedent where we, as a planning commission, cut out the elected officials on something that would normally be a recommendation to them. If this was a recommendation that we were making forth to the township board, and the township board, our elected officials were then able to make the decision, I know I'd feel better about it as a special land use, but since this is coming in as a sort of a combination, I have a concern there. It may not be a valid concern, but it concerns me a little bit that we can grant a temporary land use that bypasses or doesn't otherwise involve a governmental body that normally would have the purview to make that decision. For us, it would be a recommendation, not a grant at a special use. This being an automotive repair use, it's light, but it is a very light automotive repair use. And that concerns me more than, frankly, even more than the tent issue. And because of that, at this point, I think that I would not be in favor of granting the temporary land use, particularly given that the time frame that I could see granting it to you isn't going to work for you. And it would begin a process of setting a precedent for something that doesn't benefit you and may potentially cause problems in the township. And that's, barring any other discussion, that's my feeling on the matter right now. That's all I had to say, sir.
Do we have any other discussion? Questions? Is there any from the public? Is there anyone from the public that would like to stand up and please come up, approach, give us your name and address, please?
Hi, my name's Lynette James. I live at 65 Ponderosa Trail North here in Van Buren Township. I've lived in Van Buren Township my whole life. I've always worked within the community to provide service to my community. I understand all of your points. They're all very valid. But what I'm concerned about, we're talking aesthetics. I believe you brought up, the tent and everything, and I understand that. With the way the economy is right now, if we don't do something to get business into that strip mall, it's going to look like Rawsonville strip mall. And that's not the aesthetic you want for your township. And I wholeheartedly believe that. The way the economy is since COVID has been horrid. It's nobody's fault. But us being small business owners, we ain't got a prayer. The fireworks tents, they always get set up in the big shopping centers, Walmarts, Menards, whatever. We're just asking for some help so we can continue. We just opened a shop. We've been there less than a year. And we have lost everything. personally to make this work. And we provide free food. We provide low-cost clothes to the community. This has nothing to do, Mr. Canvasser would never let his property look horrible with garbage, anything. We would not let that happen at all. All we're asking is for a little help to get more traffic in that mall, to help our community.
And to mention, like the weekends, I'll tell you right now, the busiest days, because we're closed Sundays and Mondays, but the busiest days that we have are during the week. Yes, Fridays and Saturdays can be really good for us, but you come in on a Tuesday, you got a whole bunch of people in the store, a whole bunch of people looking around. So to just say, you know, like, oh, well, okay, do just the weekends, that's not good for business. It's just not good for business.
Mr. Chair? I'm sorry, I had a question for
Yeah.
the speakers.
Sure.
It wasn't
Ma'am,
clear to me, were they,
Lynette and,
Ms. James? I'm sorry. That's okay. That's okay.
Yes.
Are you affiliated with the applicant, Chips All Gone, or are you a different business?
No, we opened up Thrifts and Gifts in Belleville Square.
Thrifts and Gifts in Belleville
Yes.
Square. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
I wasn't clear.
Yep.
Thanks.
thank you. Any others from the audience? Please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Terla. I'm the owner of Carpet Exchange, and I've been there for 20 years. For the last, starting with the COVID, you see the parking lots getting empty and empty. We don't have any problem. This guy come and bring more traffic to the community, more traffic to the store. It will help us. For me, I've been there 20 years, but there is new ones in the plaza. They're about to walk out. And probably you've seen the plaza on Rasenberg Road. It's empty. We don't want to get that condition. If you guys help us to get this guy to work, that will help everybody. That's what I have to say. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm from Mad Gary Boutique. I've been in the plaza for 16 years, and I've been in the area 20. I was over there on Sumter Road over there by the railroad tracks right across there in that little plaza, and you see where that plaza is right now. It's empty. You see on Grove Road, that plaza is empty. Rawsonville, empty. We need help. That's all we asking for is a couple of weeks where he could come and set up, draw a little bit of traffic, and it'll help out, I'll be repeating the same thing over and over. Everybody gonna get up here and say, but we could use help. Ever since the COVID, it has slowed down the walking traffic. So anything we could get to help.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Belleville Quality Cleaners. We've been located there for over 20 years. This service has been provided in that area a couple times now. I've noticed because we're open 6 days a week. And one of the things that I noticed, first of all, there is more heavier traffic than might have been mentioned, but most of the people that come there that I observe are Belleville residents. So this is not a service that we're offering that that it appeared to me that we're going to be attracting people from, other areas to come in and be serviced. It seems like to me, from what I've observed, is the real benefit is the Belleville residents. And I think we all should keep that in mind. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Please.
Thank you. My name is Mark Canvasser, and I'm one of the owners of Belleville Square. I apologize I wasn't able to be here at the last meeting, but I was on the other end of town. We have had over a 40-plus year, 45-year relationship with Van Buren Township. My partner and friend, our company, have been involved in Van Buren since the late 70s, when we came out here and bought land. We brought to this community every major tenant, almost every major tenant on Belleville Road. We brought Myers. We brought AutoZone. We brought Aldi's. We built, own, develop, and manage Belleville Square. It was the #1 A&P in the United States. We brought Walmart. We brought Menards. We brought the older hotels. We brought Cracker Barrel. We recently just brought Kenworth that we came to the township. So I know the corridor. We brought these tenants here, and I understand. You know, our business model is simple. We own the land. We go out and look for tenants. We sign an agreement, and then they come before you. We've had many tenants that don't want to come here to the Planning Commission, and they've gone other places. You know, some boards make their own decisions, and they look at the consultants, and some consultants control the boards. This is a fairly new board, but I've been in front of planning commissions in Van Buren Township for 40-plus years. There was a long period of time when consultants didn't play a role. I want to address a few comments that came up at the last meeting. For example, someone talked about lighting, and I kind of chuckle a little bit, because whether it's daylight savings time or not daylight savings time, we deal with some darkness at 4:30. But if you ever went to your shopping center in your community, you would know that I have state-of-the-art LED lightings. If you want to complain about anything, it's too bright. You need sunglasses at Belleville Square. You know, someone made a comment, you know, you're setting a precedent. They talked about, you know, maybe someone's going to want to change headlights. Someone's going to want to change a wiper blade. Someone's going to want to do antifreeze. Those were all the comments that came at the last meeting. Mrs. Atchison owns a Ford dealership. She only sells Ford vehicles. And while I've never been in her parts room, I bet you she has many, many types of headlights for Ford vehicles only. And she pays a lot of money for those. And they sit there, sometimes for years. They have wiper blades. They sit there for years. I'm just, you heard from 6 tenants. They're trying to survive. That's all they're trying to do. What Greg didn't tell you is he's been there for 16 years, but he's not renewing his lease this year, and he wants out. He can't make it. Mike Cleaners has been there for 20 years. I hope you as a planning board support those businesses in there. I hope you go to the Cleaners. I hope you go to my nail salon, who's sitting over there and didn't talk. Greg's trying to put his daughter through medical school. You know, his business is down. I know that. As a landlord, I know when my tenants are struggling. And all we're trying to do is bring traffic. Now, really, this isn't about a 3-month or a 4-month. You know, you talk about a precedent, but is it, you know, things that happen in our world in the last 2-3 weeks or the last 3 years, we have more to worry about in the next year than whether there's going to be pop-up tents all over the B-Rod in Belleville Square. It's just not realistic. This is a quarter. If your chip in your windshield is larger than this, you're not going to chips all gone. So, you know, I know you have two applicants here. One of them, and I've never met either one of them, but one of them is my neighbor on the Service Drive at Camping World. I'm glad they're here. I don't know what their issue is, but every time I drive to see what's going on in the Kentworth building, I see that abomination sitting there. You should be ashamed that this building can sit here. I apologize. I don't know what that issue is that's sitting there, but I'm sure in their plan tonight, someone's going to talk about environmentally friendly this or that. That's what a chip repair does. So the windshield, the $2,000 F-150 windshield doesn't sit in a dump. So I think I've said what I really need to say, but you know, these tenants are just fighting. That's all. That's all they're trying to do. So if you want to be a township that's welcoming, that's trying to support their business, you know, the number one phone call, and I said this at the last meeting, I have more vacancy in Belleville Square than I've had in 20 years. And I have more tenants that are calling me up. They all have my cell phone. That's the way I operate. There were things we didn't, you know, the number one call I get, and I said this last time, is for resale shops. So while I understand you want to make this a great community, so do I. I think I've proven that for 40 years. I'm still here. I'm still wanting to make it a great community, is that you got to bend a little bit. And, you know, whether you have kids or whether you had summer jobs, you can't make enough money working a weekend to be able to go out with your friends, because that's who he's hiring. He's hiring kids. You can't make enough money on 6 weekends. In today's economy, there's a giant help wanted sign in front of O'Reilly's on Haggerty Road when you enter the township. So, you know, we're talking about a 4 or 5 month period of time. And you talk about a slow period. My Planet Fitness is a 20-year lease. 9 months is minuscule in the world of a 20-year lease. I don't lease spaces for under 3 years. So a 9-month period, great. It's great. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? We have something through the Zoom.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have something through the Zoom. There's a Valan who's attending and would like, I think, to make a comment. And Valan, you can either, if you'd like to, I can bring you in as a panelist, or if you want to type your comment, but I'll see if you're able to come on in and speak as a panelist. See a hand raised too with that, so I think we will hear from Valan. Okay, Valan, if you'd like to. How are you? Doing well, thank you. Make sure you're nice and amplified.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Valan Willis, and I'm the owner of AAA in the Belleville Square Plaza, and I'm also a director on the Van Buren Township DDA. When I moved in our plaza 7 years ago, there was a lot of traffic that came into my office. Every single day there was walk-in traffic. Over the years since the tenancy has decreased, there's been less and less traffic. So our daily struggle is, how can we bring more customers in our plaza? So I do think that the chip business would help us. I do think it's a good service. One thing about the chip business is it does affect my business directly because claims count against us. So when customers have claims, it can increase their policy. And I spoke to Pete, and if we were able to work out something where even my customers pay cash to get their windshields done. That would save them from making a claim on their insurance, so their insurance policies won't increase. Either from the insurance company paying for the chips to be repaired or for the window to be replaced. So I do think this business would help us. 3 to 4 months is not that long of a time span. And ultimately, America is a country that loves to see entrepreneurship thrive. But however, since the pandemic, we have not been able to, well, businesses have not been able to sustain longer than 5 years. So I do think this business will be beneficial to our community. Now, the other concern that I did have is that the tent was going to be very, very close to Arby's, to that traffic area, but it was addressed earlier. Moving it back would be one of the better options. So it's more near Planet Fitness area. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
We're still here. Thank you, Valon. If you have no further comment, we can go ahead and take you back into the attendee section. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else there on Zoom? Director Power?
The only comment that we had was Valon's, and I don't see anybody else in the attendees list, so no, there's nobody else.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay, we have moved to the point. Do we want to consider? Yes.
Chair, through the chair, can we still ask what question?
Commissioner Grant?
Yeah, I would like to ask Dan a question. Just to be clear, because this is potentially be a special land use, would this in any way need to have a variance to the overlay district at all?
To the overlay district, so it's kind of hitting on a couple of different points. The Belleville Road Overlay District, in terms of the aesthetic requirements of the Belleville Road Overlay District.
Right.
I think as Ms. Krishnan said, the BROD does not contemplate temporary land uses. They're kind of two separate sections of the zoning ordinance that don't really, if it was a permanent land use, then the full weight of the BROD standards would apply. I think to the extent that this business has a presence on the site for a longer period of time, the aesthetics may be something you weigh more heavily, but any kind of temporary land use is probably not going to meet all of the requirements of the BROD. But I don't think that would necessarily require a variance to address, because we have other temporary land use reviews that have gone through in the BROD without requiring brick cladding and things like that.
And the other question really is for Planner Vidya. It has to do with the recommendation regarding the time allotment for the use of this area. It says a period of 6 weekends, which may or may not be consecutive, but not to exceed a total of 14 days. And the thought of it is taken into account, so like the comments from the public, you know, their comment was, well, weekends don't work. But would it matter if it was 6 weeks, but a total 6 weeks consecutively or not, that may total up to 14 days?
You can modify the recommendation
Okay.
any which way, Mr. Grant. Our assumption was that the businesses work more during the weekends, but based upon the
Right.
tenants, weekdays tend to be more busy, so the planning commission can modify the timeline as you seem suitable based upon public.
Right, so they could pick Wednesdays and Fridays,
Oh,
or Wednesdays and
absolutely.
Saturdays, and then it's for the same total, but for the same
Yes.
period of time.
Yes.
Just as a thought of consideration.
Any other comments?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Mr. Canvasser had indicated that, you know, us as a planning commission, we have the autonomy to make decisions, come up with opinions, set durations and times. The world has changed. You know, when the B-ROD was, you know, enacted and came together, our community was very different. I'm not sure Walmart's been here for 15 years. I know Aldi hasn't been here for 15 years. It's a different world. And I feel, you know, I'm a business owner. I know how hard it is to retain your employees, help them make money, pay your own expenses. And I feel an obligation to the businesses in our community. We know we talk many times about unanticipated repercussions. I have no problem with 3 months. I have no problem with 4 months. Traffic creates traffic. Business creates business. Sales create sales. We, as Mr. Canvasser said, we have the autonomy to make those decisions. Our consultant is there to provide us with guidance, with shepherding through a process. We needed McKenna and Associates to put together the B-ROD because I wasn't here then, but whoever was putting it together, the people that were here wanted a premier community. And I feel like our B-ROD is like a premier community. However, the world has changed drastically. I had tents on Atchison Ford's property because during COVID, we were deemed essential business. And as essential business, our team did not want customers inside the dealership, so we met them outside of the dealership. This is the first tent of many that are coming. So I don't want Mr. Burgard and his service to our township with the windshields not costing $500 or $2,000, the increase in insurance. I don't want the businesses suffering less traffic. I am open to wanting to consider something that we could do for him, for this service. And it's not just for him, it's for, you know, the community residents that don't own a business in the Belleville Square. And it's also for the environment. And it's also for the business owners. You know, when you go through a place and you see, oh, they have a nail place here. Oh, I'll go get my nails done here. It's close. Oh, there's a dry cleaners. I'm going to go to the dry cleaners. I really believe we should consider this, and I am in support of 4 months. I think the DDA letter is very supportive of it. I don't know if the B-ROD was created based on the DDA, but the DDA wants these businesses viable because that's how the DDA receives its monies. That, again, is put into our community for our residents. Now, if we want to just abide by the ordinances, okay, we don't need a planning commission. We need Dan, and we need our consultants, an engineer, and planners. And we don't have to make any decisions. It's easy. We sit here and say yes or no. This is tough. It's tough. But I do believe it is showing us, because I wrote a few things about how the world has changed since COVID, and that we do need to look with a very critical eye at what our requirements are in the overlay district. And maybe we need to say, are these reasonable? Are they now reasonable? Maybe they were reasonable 15 years ago, but maybe they're not now. But I won't be able to sleep at night unless I put it on your hearts that these businesses, we need them, and our residents need them too. And it's easy to say no.
Through the chair, just one correction, Medina. The DDA gets money from taxes that are paid. This kind of a business that's coming into a tent is not paying taxes, not, just to correct that statement. And I understand what you're saying, and I don't mind making some changes. And maybe we need to look at the ordinance. I do think, just a minute, I do think the biggest thing is, it says it's temporary. So I have concerns with if we take it too long, it's no longer temporary. I think I could concede to the 3 months, and that would be pushing it, just to see how it works.
Thank you. I'd like to push it, and I'd like to push it. To just be clear, I was not saying that Mr. Brigard's business would be paying taxes.
No, I know you weren't, but you just said that's how they get. I just
Okay,
wanted
yeah.
to correct
Yeah,
that.
it's the businesses.
Right,
Within that shopping center, but if we don't have them,
that's true.
so there's repercussions to the decisions that we make, and we have to sleep at night, and we have to make sure that we're not, because after, I don't want Rawsonville here. So we have Rawsonville, Jeff and I talked about this today. We have a McDonald's on Rawsonville Road, we have a McDonald's on Belleville Road, we have a Burger King on Rawsonville Road, we have a Burger King. We're gonna have a vacant shopping center on Rawsonville Road, and we're not gonna have another one. Nobody's gonna wanna come here. Everybody's gonna continue to leave our area to do business and to go shopping. That's not a premier community, and I want our entire community to be a premier. So I put it on the planning commission that we come up with something here. 4 months, 3 months, trustee Bud, treasurer Bud, excuse me. I have to have something. We have to have something. Jeff?
Did I look like I had something to add after that?
I need you to have something.
Whoa, hey, no pressure. Treasurer Bud, you're on the board of, you work at the board. Was my concern about the special land use, did that weigh, is that something that I should be concerned about us issuing this as a temporary versus a, because it's an automotive repair, and normally that's the purview of the upper level board. Is that something you'd be concerned about as a board member?
Well, and I do believe we need to look at the ordinance, and it's an item like that I think the township board should be looking at.
Yeah.
Because I understand about the premier community, and I understand that times are changing and that we need to change with them. But also, how many tents do we want in our premier community strip? That's why we had the B-Rod set up in the first place. And you'll also notice there's more people that are walking on the sidewalks. So the benches are being used. People are putting trash in those barrels. And they're there because we want it to look good so that when people come into the community, and as far as, I do believe that as far as the Rawsonville, we haven't actually gotten anything, but the idea is it was going to be torn down anyway. So I think that's why it was being emptied out. But that's another case for another whole story, because we don't like to see businesses go. We never do. But there's not much we can do when Kmart decides to close all their stores. We can't handle those things or when anybody else. So I think we need to be careful of what we do allow. We have taken other things and give it a trial. We can do that. But I think we just got to be real careful, because this might be the best person that ever came in and did a business like this. But he's not paying the water bills that the other people in the shopping centers are having to pay. He's not having to pay the taxes. He's not paying rent on anything. right or wrong, what is the next guy gonna do, and what have we set the community up to look like now when we do some of these things? Which is why I think we have zoning ordinances. I think the planning people help us follow them through. Dan helps us follow them through. And I think we also have to keep in the back that this is what the rule says, but we're gonna try to help you guide it through it.
Treasurer Bud, if you're, okay with that procedural issue about the special automotive land use, and on a temporary basis, I think I would be okay with the use at 3 months as well, if we as a body agreed that we would go and look at the Belleville Road Overlay District standards, so that the next time a person with a good business plan wants to come in and put a tent type, temporary use into the parking lot, we're prepared for it. I feel like we've been talking about this for 2 meetings and several hours, and I think we've covered the ground. But I want to make sure that it feeds back into our ordinances, into our Belleville Road Overlay District, so that we have a very clear path of what we do next time, what we do next year, when the applicant, comes back and wants to
And I
reapply.
would also say if we do grant the 3 months, there would be the stipulation, there would be no automatic renewal until we got a chance to see if this is where we wanted to go.
How many times is a temporary land use applicant allowed to reapply in the same year? Any temporary land use?
That can be a function of your conditions you place on it. So you could make that a condition of approval, that this is a one-time 3-month or however long you want it to occur, not to be sought again until this is investigated, at least a year from now.
So I would just say that there wouldn't be a renewal at this time until we can work through the whole process.
Seems okay to me.
If we're going to be talking about duration, can we talk about what that looks like? Is that Memorial Day to Labor Day? Based on the original recommendation, it's a shorter duration, and it looks like it could be limited days per week. Would you pick peak days, like allow them 3 days a week for the duration of 3 months, or are we just saying every day for 3 months?
He's got it for 3 months.
Right, so it's any day for 3 months.
Any
A
day
tent
in 3 months.
for 3 months.
3 months.
Or however the motion is
Right.
worded.
Right.
Do we have any other discussion? Any other comments? Anyone?
I don't know if there's much left to say.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to see if there's any interest in identifying they basically said themselves Mondays and Tuesdays are not good days. And it almost sounds like weekends aren't good days. Maybe I would consider Saturday. It seems like it would be. So would we say Saturdays through Tuesdays aren't days for the tenting, and that the rest of the days are for 3 months? That kind of gets a little closer to what the recommendation is, but yes, we can modify that to accommodate their use, which seems to be fair to me.
Would the applicant be able to work with that type of constraint?
That's the question.
That's really the question. He's said that, anything less than 3 months isn't going to work for him.
Correct.
So obviously the 6 weekends is a non-starter for you.
Right.
For the applicant, sir.
We can start at the 3 months.
Right.
Months, it means 30, 60, 90.
So we also talked about days too, because you had mentioned,
90
I've been
days.
hearing Mondays, Tuesdays aren't good days.
90 days.
And
'cause
Sundays aren't good days.
90 days. All days are good for us, because no one wants to lose $500 instead of 15 minutes to get their chip fixed on their windshield.
So our original discussion was weekends weren't any good.
Right, but we're just saying 3 months, period. He picks the days.
Well, he just
He's
gets 3
saying-
months
yeah,
straight, any
right.
days.
He's saying every day for him is good. correct?
No.
I'm saying every day is a great day to save $500 off getting your chip fixed.
Right.
We'll be out there. But as soon as we pick, okay, let's do these 3 days of the week, these 3 days of the week, well, that's when the 3 days rain and the wind blows. So we need 90 days to get, I mean, I put down 9 months initially.
Right.
Do you anticipate being out there every day? And does your tent stay up for that duration
No, we'll put down the 10 by 10 tent and take it down.
every day?
I have a question for Ms. Krishnan. How is this, by granting it, if we look at the 3-month, is this setting any type of precedent that we have to be concerned with next week, 2 months from now, before we have a chance to really evaluate that ordinance and determine what we have to do? Are we going to run into some problems? I noticed yours was 6 weeks and 14 days. That's why I'm concerned when we start to extend the time. And I'm not worried about him. What I'm worried about is brought up last time. Somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want to put batteries in a car, or headlight polishing, or whatever the case is. Are we going to be into a situation where we're going to be bound, and they go to, it doesn't have to be at Mr. Canvasser's parking lot. It could be down at the corner at Belleville and Ecorse, where the old 4Ks, or Mr. K's, I guess it was, the little restaurant was. They get that parking space and they could throw a tent up there.
So if you approve the use at this time, and until the ordinance is changed to reflect that you're okay with such uses, yes, any future use that comes until the new ordinance is in place should be treated the same, irrespective of which zoning district, where it is in the township. You have to apply the regulations evenly to everybody.
And through the chair, excuse me, why do we have a planning commission? You know, we should just abide by the ordinances. Is it yes or is it no? Is it gray or is it white? Is it left or is it right? And we don't need our experiences where we've been. At the last meeting, I indicated this does not set a precedence. Nobody is going to set up a tent and start changing oil. It's impossible. Nobody's gonna set up a tent and start changing batteries. You can do it in a parking lot at O'Reilly's, as long as you have, or AutoZone, O'Reilly's, as long as you have the right battery, as long as you have the right equipment. Yeah, you can do it yourself, but no, it's not a moneymaker. It's just impossible. It's not gonna set a precedence. And then I guess Mr. Regard, has anybody set up a tent next to you that you're aware of?
Commissioner Atkinson, just one clarification. It's just a clarification, not a rebuttal. When I say precedent, I'm not talking about somebody coming and changing batteries or doing oil change. That's not feasible. It can be as simple as somebody setting up a tent like that and selling homemade baked goods, somebody selling homemade dresses, craft supplies, any retail use, any service use. If somebody wants to do hairstyling, any temporary use. We are not talking about automotive uses.
Okay.
We would disregard the automotive uses because that is that whole special land use. Our ordinance doesn't forbid it, so you can consider it until you change your ordinance if you choose to. The precedent is talking about any land use. That's all.
Yes.
So anybody can come and set up a business on private property.
Through the chair, can I help? answer that. So there's always going to be a control valve on temporary land uses. Our ordinance officers are out there to help to monitor setup of any kind of when things like that occur. And there's a peddler's license process partnered with the temporary land use approval process. So there will still be a process by which anything like that would get reviewed. Knock on wood, because you never know what's waiting there at the wings, but this kind of thing doesn't come up very often in terms of the people that come in to make inquiries in the building department about land uses. There are mobile food vendors and different temporary land uses here and there, but I don't get the sense from my experience it's something that there's going to be a flush just because of what's happening tonight. But I think there's a valid point that the potential is there, but there's always the process that you as the planning commission will always be given the opportunity to review anything that lasts longer than 7 days or 2 consecutive weekends per our zoning ordinance. And our code enforcement people are out there to monitor and make sure people aren't just setting up shop without getting permits or approvals. So just to provide some ease on the aspect of the enforcement of the ordinance.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'd like to ask Mr. Canvasser some questions. I'm sorry, is that how you say your name, Mr. Canvasser? You had made a comment, I just would like to hear it. I can't hear back there. You had said that nobody wants to come here because of this planning commission? I need clarification on that, because I've been here a long time.
It was a little different. Not nobody and not this commission. The years, we've had opportunities that did not make it to Belleville Road. There's a reason why Target is up on Michigan Avenue. We had a signed purchase agreement with Target. We have a piece of land that Target identified. We had Home Depot. There's a reason why Home Depot is.
Excuse me, you're saying that you had Target here in Van Buren Township, not just your ownership wherever else you own land?
Signed purchase agreement with
Here
Target to
in
go on
Van Buren
24 acres of land, which is the 24 acres of land where presently AutoZone and Aldi sit. It was that whole piece. They moved up. I made the deal with, now AutoZone, you've seen that, you see that building every day. 38 months in front of the Planning Commission for approval. That was a different time. It wasn't McKenna. It was another consultant, different engineers. It was an anti-development group, basically, in the township. But yeah, you know, I own the outlets in front of Menards. There's a lot of QSRs that want to come here, but you know, this is a 3-month
QSR.
service restaurant.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Chipotle, Panera, Chick-fil-A, DQ. I hear from them all. I mean, 2 of them are already up on Michigan Avenue for different reasons, but. You know, I think you guys are going on 4 hours of discussion, public discussion with, you know, trust me, he's not paying that much rent. It's really whether, Belleville Square is not going to live or die whether Peter gets his approval. It's much more than that. You got to be able to get tenants in here, welcome them, people, and run their business and move on. You know, we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in property tax. Through the years, we've paid millions of dollars. You know, you pay a lot of money to consultants. You take the risk, you do it, no one's opening up. Dan said, there's a stopgap. The poor guy wants to open up a little business. I certainly wouldn't do it. I don't think any of you would want to do it 7 days a week. Give them a break, help some of these tenants out. That's what that's a welcoming community.
I think it's that we're against Mr. Burgard. I think what the question is, and the reason that we've had so much conversation up here concerning this, is what does that open us up to see what we have elsewhere in the township. I understand your concern is with Belleville Square. I understand that. And I understand, and I've been in this community, I was born and raised in this community, and I understand where this has been. But I also know that if we just allow something to happen without investigating where it can lead to, we open ourselves up to a whole bunch of problems that it doesn't provide for that premier community that we're looking for. And and so that's why it's taking us so long to go through this.
You know, I don't think you would want to get your hair cut from someone under a 10. I don't think your wife or your daughter or your female in your life would want to buy a dress from someone under a 10. I wouldn't want to buy cookies from someone underneath a 10. Dan already said there's a stopgap. Listen, if there were lots of businesses, Peter wouldn't be the first one coming here with a 10. So
I'm not disagreeing with you.
I think it's time you ought to make a motion, and you ought to call the question if I answered your questions.
We're getting to that point.
Through the chair, could I ask one more question? Just, I mean, he brought up a lot of good points about the economy and commercial centers, you know, within our region. And I think it would behoove us, based on some of your comments about planning commissions, to better understand from his perspective as to what might help bolster and bring in, you know, more businesses to your commercial centers and support them. And at this point in time, like you said, I agree. I don't think, you know, Chips Be Gone is gonna, you know, bring your center back and bring all sorts of people in. It's just not gonna happen. I mean, and I know COVID is always everybody's first go-to, but other than COVID, what other thing, you know, COVID's changing a lot of things. It's changing the way people buy services and where they get them from. I mean, look at the Prime trucks running up and down everybody's streets now. I mean, but what are things that we can help you out with, you know, just because you brought it up, what are things that we could help you out with in the future, you know, and I don't know what your occupancy rate is right now, that would help to bolster your businesses and bring people into those shopping centers?
So after the last meeting, let me back up to your first thing. I'd be happy to meet you for coffee. I'd be happy to meet anyone on the planning. You know, I'd love to have a quick demonstration. I have lots of overlays of Van Buren Township and who has come and gone. I have a lot of history of all that. So I'm happy to meet you and just talk about that. It's probably a much longer conversation than that's fair to the other applicants that are here tonight and everyone else. But, you know, the world has changed, and retailers change, and Amazon has created issues. And yes, Belleville Square is built off the road, and it doesn't have great visibility. So I'm dealing with some structural issues that worked great in the 80s when there was no Taco Bell, which is now Verizon, and there wasn't a McDonald's, and there wasn't an Arby's, but I'm happy to, I think that's a longer conversation.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that Chips Be Gone is not going to save the center.
No,
and for the short duration it's there, it's not going to save the center. And to go back to the chair's comment, really, we want to bring business into this community. We support it as much as we can in any way we can. But as the chair was saying, I mean, we operate within ordinances that we develop as experts, you know, and we bring them in to interpret them as well. That's what we're here for. And we operate within that. Yes, we have some leeway, and I think that we're going to operate that way a little bit today, you know, within that leeway. And I think it's great that we share all of our, you know, our opinions on this, but in the end, and we understand the difficulties, you know, that our commercial centers are having, and we do everything we can to help support them, but we still have to operate within our ordinances. And I have a feeling that we're going to be looking at that, you know, after this meeting, and we may be looking at more than just this one. So I just wanted to say, at this point in time, that's what our job is at this point, you know, for this meeting.
I had a really great relationship with Susan Ireland, and after your last meeting, I called her at 9 o'clock. I waited to 9 o'clock because I have her cell number, and I was going to call her at 5 a.m., but I didn't think that was nice. And when I told her that the planning commission wanted her to opine, she goes, "We've never opined." You know, now I bet you that's going to become a new standard where you're going to want and so I set up a meeting with her and Marie, and I met them.
Yeah.
So business for me is the DDA. I always work with the DDA.
Right.
I talk to them, who's coming into town, what's going on. And it's not just for Belleville Square.
Yeah.
It's for the land on the service drive on the east and west. It's down on Sumter and Hall Road. There's a lot of things.
I'd have to say I appreciate the fact that you've come in and sort of given us a different perspective from your side of
Dan knows
road
how
of
to,
what's
Dan
going
knows
on.
how to reach me. Sherry's known me for 40 years, or a lot, so I'm happy to talk to you. Everyone knows how to reach me.
Okay.
Thank you for your
Thank
time. I
you.
appreciate your consideration tonight. Thank you.
Do we have any other discussion? Do we have a motion?
Through the chair? I move to grant the applicant Peter Burgard temporary land use permit to conduct a temporary windshield glass repair, land use, location 10972 Belleville Road, parcel number ID 83064 99003 707, which is also known as the Belleville Square Shopping Plaza. I indicate for the record that the conditions is that Mr. Begard is to run his business, Chips All Gone, for an establishment of 3 months, no more. The days of operation will be his choosing. I believe he said 90 days. I'm not sure if that just means consecutively 90 days. I would like to capture for the, this motion, 3 months, and I think that is it. Am I missing?
Could you make that 90 days? We don't know when he's going to start the 3 months. It could be,
Unknowing
yeah.
when Mr. Begard will be starting.
Is that consecutive?
And then also the 10th.
Yes, I should say?
I believe that would be consecutive days, yeah, rather than 90 days throughout the year, right?
And
Okay.
then the tent is no more than 10 by 10. Referencing the letter from the DDA authored by Director, I believe her name is Mary
Yep.
Colburn. Thank you.
I would like you to reference also the Dan Powers note and Vidia's and our planners, if you don't mind.
For the record, I ask that, that we contain the review of findings from Dan Power letter dated April 6th, the McKenna letter dated April 4th or April 2nd?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was.
April 2nd, 2023. And then I had already contained the letter from the DDA dated April 4th, 2023.
Discussion?
Do we have any discussion on the motion?
Does the motion?
Commissioner Jarrah?
Commissioner, does the motion include the location recommended by the DDA?
Yes, sir.
And is this limited to a one-time thing for the year, or how does that work?
I thought the general consensus for this one was, it was more like we're gonna try it, it's 90 days. That's it until we look at the ordinance and adjust things.
So do you have to get that language into this motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Turns that.
Please add to the motion, this is for 90 days with no ability to renew until the ordinance has been looked at and updated. Thank you.
And through the chair, to add to the discussion, can I ask the planning commission to clarify if the 90 days begins with the approval tonight, or is there a different start date that you are asking the applicant to contemplate?
So we would say something like.
Can't hear him.
Sir, you have to, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry, boss.
That's what your advice.
I'll look at it, and it'll probably most likely be June, July, August, but it might be May 1st and 3 months from that time. So do you need the dates right now?
Would a start date to begin sometime between May 1st and
June
June
1st.
1st?
Yeah,
90 consecutive days
Yes.
from your first start date?
perfect.
Be acceptable?
Yeah,
That language is captured in the motion?
I can repeat it.
Sorry, I'm really sorry, I think you should though.
With a start date of between May 1st and June 1st for a consecutively from that start date for 90 days.
Who seconded the motion?
Do we have a support for the motion?
Support.
We have a motion by Commissioner Atchison, support by Commissioner Poole. Could we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Bernie Grant? Yes. Sherry Budd?
Yes.
Atkinson?
Yes.
Jackson Paul? Jeff Jar? Kellen?
Yes.
thank you.
Sorry that it's taken us so long, but hopefully you understand what we've been going through within ourselves as we go through this process.
Appreciate it. I do get what you're trying to do.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
really good.
And thank you. Okay.
Before we proceed to the next item, I would like to make some points. I did not want to speak out of turn when the case was going on. First and foremost, Mr. Canvasser made very snarky and not so subtle comments about consultants running the Planning Commission. I'm flattered that he thinks I have so much influence that I can influence an entire Planning Commission. And I also think he insults the rest of the Planning Commission, which is comprised of educated professionals and citizens who have devoted their time to the community. If I did not advise you on the consequences of your actions, I am not doing my job. I've been hired to do a job, and what I do is make recommendations. I'm not here to be anti-business, as he so loved to state over here. I also want Mr. Canvasser to understand I would not be presumptuous enough to advise him on what his lease times need to be or what his lease rates need to be. I would hope he would not be presumptuous enough to advise me how to be a planner. I have enough educational degrees and 24 years of planning experience to back up what I say. So as long as he is interested in having a communication about how we make Van Buren a better place to live, I'm more than always open. But if you want to get snarky, I'm open to that too.
Thank you. And Ms. Krishnan, we as a board appreciate what you do and don't care what anybody else has to say for it. To be honest with you, I'm upfront.
Enough developers who have come through here who know that we work. We wouldn't be a planning consulting firm if we were anti-development. We would have to shut our doors and walk away. We work to get the best for the community, and yes, sometimes at the outset to developers it might seem like we are being difficult, but the end result is to help them have a business that is successful and helps them stay there for a long time since they're investing so much money in it. So to come waving a banner saying, you know, I am actually influencing or basically directing the board or taking away the Planning Commission's role is just a sort of speaking out of both sides of your mouth.
Well, we know that you do the research and provide us with that research so that we don't have to spend that time.
Thank you.
And through the chair, I certainly agree. I never figured you were running the planning commission, and I certainly appreciate all that you and Dan has done to give us directions. I guess I also would like to say I resented the fact that he said, well, this business didn't come because of this and this, because of what we did. I've been here long enough to know that some of those projects he talked about was Wayne County. It was drainage problems. It was all
Yes.
those other things that were going on that we could not take care of and could not be answered, so we didn't fit the criteria for what they ended up wanting in the first place. Yeah, they came and looked, but they left, and it always had nothing to do with this planning commission. A lot of times, we had to deal with the county, and then we turned around and had to deal with the developer, and then we had to turn around and deal with the, and I think, as far as I'm concerned, the fact that we've spent so long talking about it tells me that we all care, but we are also very concerned with what we were looking at, where a tent does not serve what the ordinance says. And I think that's been the concern of all of us.
I was there when Walmart was first approved 20 years ago, and Walmart came in saying the same thing. We build blue and gray private buildings, and we said, well, you're going to build the first brick Walmart, aren't you? And we got the
They
first
did.
brick Walmart.
Good.
I was here when that was done, and that was one of my first big projects in Van Buren Township. So I am just as familiar with how the township has evolved over 20 years as Mr. Canvasser is in his real estate dealings.
Yes, and
In the discussion, I would like to say, Vidya, I've learned a lot from you. I don't want you to think with, my challenge of this that I was, not appreciating your input or valuing you. I've learned a lot from you and, Treasurer Bud. I've looked up to you guys for a lot of guidance. However, even though this was painful, I do believe that it is shedding some light that we have to look at some
Yes.
things. And that was something that, I had written down a lot of comments that I wanted to share about, like the B-Rod. And, we've developed it completely heading southward. It's probably now going to move northward. And we need to be prepared because more tents are coming. And maybe Mr. Brigard has done us a favor that we're getting maybe ahead of the tents so that we can be
okay.
I would not go that far, but yes.
I would
the
certainly
yeah,
hope not.
I would not go that far, but yes, I would say the Planning Commission responds to changes, and that's your whole role. You have seen now there is a gap that probably needs to be accommodated thanks to COVID creating some necessities. So,
sarcastic when I said be prepared for the tents coming. It was a joke and prepared for the changes coming, I guess is what I should be saying.
Okay.
And I hope nobody was insulted, but I wanted clarification when he said this planning commission, because he was talking about
Us.
Jackson just got here,
Well,
and the rest of us.
He is
And I'm
following.
like,
well, can we hold this
Yes, let's-
conversation and move ahead on to our new business, please? And we'll have room to come back and make some comments at the end of this. Yes. Okay, we're moving ahead. New business. Item number 1, amended preliminary site plan request for mobile gas station redevelopment and drive-through. A request by Stonefield Engineering and Design on behalf of owner IS Real Estate LLC, Belleville Oil Company Incorporated, for an amended preliminary site plan to demolish buildings on an existing gas station site and to construct a new convenience store with retail and food service, including a drive-through lane and 1 drive-through window, gasoline pumps, and related site improvements. The location is on a 1.06 plus or minus acre site, Zone C1, General Business District, located at 11250 Haggerty Road. Tax parcel number 830519900030002 at the northwest corner of the intersection of I-94 Service Drive and Haggerty Road. We first will hear a presentation from the township staff and consultants.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I believe Mr. Kammer had indicated earlier in the meeting that he may have a hard stop time this evening, I wanted to do him the courtesy of, since we have gone so long, that if he did have a hard stop time and needed to go first, or we could accommodate, if that's still the case, sir.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Never
Good to
mind,
me.
Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Director Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to summarize the request before you, in addition to what the chair said, this site has been under common ownership since there was a different version of this submittal that was previously reviewed by the Planning Commission. Just to go over the steps of how this particular version of the request transpired. The Planning Commission reviewed a preliminary site plan in August 2020, and then approved a preliminary site plan and a special land use recommendation in May of 2021. The Board of Trustees approved the special land use for the drive-through component of the use in June of 2021. Since that time, the owner had changed design engineers, and there are slight changes to the plans, which I'm sure the our planner and our engineer will review, but I have no comments other than what comments are provided by our consultants, except as usual, at the end of their comments, I'll state the fire marshal report summary at the end. So with no further ado, I'll turn this over to Vidya Krishnan, our principal planner and planning consultant.
Thank you, Director Power. Thank you, members of the commission. As Director Power summarized, this project has already been before you for conditional land use and site plan approval. The conditional land use approval goes with the land, so the applicant at this point of time, even though they changed designers, does not need new conditional land use approval. They already have that. What they are before you for is preliminary site plan approval again, because they changed their design once they got a new designer on board. Since the applicant got approval in June of 2021, the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees adopted new regulations for gas service stations. But the applicant's petition predates. They had been granted an extension also. They predate our adoption of the ordinance, so it's only fair that the application still be processed under the old regulations. We did, however, make the applicant aware of our new standards, and they did their best to comply wherever they could, so they've done a pretty good job of that. With regard to dimensional requirements, the new building that you see over there with the drive-through restaurant does meet all of the setback requirements. They have existing access drives of I-94 Service Drive and of Haggerty Road, which is going to be redesigned in order to accommodate all of their turn movements. They are providing, as is required by the township, cross-access to the property to the north and to the west. If you look at the site plan, you can see a little gap in the vegetation. Those are the stub connections for future developments to the vacant parcels to their north and west. The site plan actually shows something painted on there, so I was not sure, as Dan is pointing out, whether that is painted on the surface or is that going to be a bar across. So if in the future another site is built over there, they can just connect through. So that's just a minor clarification. The drive-through design was discussed extensively when the applicant first came forward, because we wanted to make sure that there is enough of a bypass lane for an emergency vehicle to go through in case the drive-through is backed up. And they have designed it with mountable curbs so that an emergency vehicle can actually climb the curb if necessary and be able to make that turn. However, we do need the fire marshal to once again review this and make sure that it is okay. The applicant has provided truck circulation diagrams, but because the tanks are located where they were previously too, right off I-94 Service Drive, it's a really tight circulation plan. They have their dumpsters, their drive-through exit, their loading area, and the tanker refueling all in the southwest corner of the site. It's rather tight. So we just wanted the applicant to clarify what happens if your loading truck comes when a tanker is refueling. Your truck is just stopped. It cannot get in there. So basically, we're looking for clarification whether they can stagger their loading times or monitor their tanker delivery times so that the two do not overlap each other. We cannot have a loading truck and a tanker at the same time, because then that blocks off complete access from the drive-through bypass lane too. So you'll have no emergency access from that site. So it's a tight circulation, but if they do time management based upon delivery schedules, they can accommodate it. So we're looking for clarification. All of the parking spaces on the site are double striped, and they have the required number of parking spaces and stacking spaces as they need. Now, the applicant has made revisions to the plan to include When I say revisions to the plan compared to the preliminary plan that you previously approved, they have added 2 additional spaces. One that is near the dumpster, if Director Power can point that out. So that spot is an extra parking spot. And they also added another space next to the RV parking spaces, which is closer to the southeast corner of the site. Now, the space abutting the dumpster needs to be labeled as an employee space. You really don't want your customer to park there and try walking across all of it. So as long as it's labeled as an employee parking, it would be okay. The second space that has been created next to the RV parking spaces has basically been done by narrowing the green belt along I-94. That is an unnecessary space. The applicant has enough number of spaces, so there's really no need to add a space and narrow a green belt. So I would suggest that you take out that extra space and just put the green belt back to what it was. I mean, they have more than they need spaces, so it's unnecessary. Just the required number of spaces should be adequate. They do meet the barrier-free parking requirement for the site, and the loading space, as I previously mentioned, not the most ideal, but cannot possibly be accommodated anywhere else on the site more functionally. So as long as the times are staggered, it should be functional. The landscape plan and screening, and this is where our biggest problem was. They have a new designer, and the new designer has redesigned the site, but the landscape plan is based on the old layout of the site. The two do not match. So the landscape plan needs to be updated to show the new site plan. And all their calculations are up to date. Just make sure to put the same plantings on the new layout so that we can verify that they have all of it. With regard to tree removal permit, the site shows 3 trees along the site's 2 frontages. There are only 3 existing trees. For the most part, it is vacant, but the species and the size are not identified. If these trees happen to be regulated, which is 5 inches diameter or greater, they will need to be replaced. It's not much of a tree replacement, but we do need to know whether you need to replace it or not. If they need to be replaced, just put those trees somewhere on the green belt and we can count it towards the replacement standards. Stormwater detention, I will leave that to the township engineer's review. With regard to lighting, there is a photometric plan that shows lighting under the gas station canopy, and there is a single light pole on the southwest corner of the site. There are no other fixtures shown on the entire site. I mean, there is not much light in that area. It's got vacant parcel to the north and to the west. The gas station canopy underside lighting is not adequate to safely light up the property. So the applicant needs to revise their photometric plan to provide adequate illumination to the sidewalks along both street frontages and on the site for the safety of the customers and the drive-through. There are literally no wall pack shown. I'm guessing it just got missed on the photometric plan. I cannot imagine a building without lights on it. So it just needs to be put on there, and the lighting plan needs to be updated. With regard to architecture and facades, a couple of elevations are incorrectly labeled north-south. They just need to be fixed. Now, they did revise their architecture compared to what you previously approved. The previous architecture had lots of, it had more brick, stone, and masonry material. The applicant has changed that a little bit. They initially came with a building that was more fiber cement. We asked them to go back and revise it, and at this time, they have proposed this architectural detail in front of you. It is designed to accommodate a fast food drive-through, and it is a modern-looking building. It is not unattractive, but we have made suggestions for maybe adding some banding or something to further enhance it. The building by itself, we believe, adequately meets the ordinance standards. The gas station canopy, when they previously came before you, it had a pitched roof. It had all brick. Now it's a regular metal flat canopy with just the pillars. So we would like the applicant to revisit the canopy design so that it matches the building. Encase the columns structure wrapped entirely in masonry, topped with fiber cement all to the top. Even if the roof cannot be fully pitched, some amount of detail needs to be provided so it matches the modern appearance of the building. All of the recent gas stations that the Planning Commission has looked at, even the one at the corner of Tyler Road, had a more architecturally detailed canopy roof. The building looks nice, but the canopy seems still the old-fashioned gas station. So we would like them to try to update its design like they had previously done, which was much more attractive. The dumpster enclosure meets the ordinance standards. Signage, there is an existing sign on the southwest corner of the property. The applicant has named it as, it's labeled on the site plan as a billboard. It is not a billboard, it is actually a pylon sign. A billboard sign is defined as a sign that advertises a business that is not located on the property. This is a mobile site with a mobile sign. It is just a gigantic pylon sign, which is not in compliance with the ordinance standards. So the sign needs to be removed and brought into compliance with the ordinance standards. So it's incorrectly labeled as billboard. The site plan does say that the owner will address this later, but this is not an issue that can be administratively handled by Director Power or myself. We do not have the authority. It needs to be part and parcel of the action on the site plan. So we would require that the applicant remove the non-conforming sign as part of the site plan approval and conditional land use that was granted to this project. Based upon our review of the project, many of the design questions, the site did undergo a total change when the designer changed. It is well laid out. They've addressed a lot of design questions, but there are still lots of smaller points that do need to be fixed. And I believe they also have some engineering concerns left. So our recommendation was for the Planning Commission to grant preliminary site plan approval subject to the 11 conditions noted in our review letter dated March 23rd, subject to the applicant coming back for final site plan approval after full engineering approval from Wayne County and the township engineer. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Not to reiterate everything that Dan and or Director Power and Ms. Christian mentioned, but the site plan, although under new design, is roughly about back to where it was when we previously approved this back in June of 2021. So our comments are minimal because they did address a lot of the things that we previously had mentioned and had concerns with. But I will go through the minor concerns in our letter for all the services that are for or currently on the site. Currently, the water main service and the sanitary service are both located along Haggerty Road in the northeast quadrant of the site. The applicant's plan is to propose a new water service lead connecting to the existing water service in the northeast quadrant of the site. There's currently one fire hydrant located on the water main in that quadrant. We defer to the township fire marshal to and his recommendation as to whether or not that one water fire hydrant is enough to properly protect the site with fire protection. For the sanitary service, similarly, the connection is in the northeast quadrant of the site. The applicant proposes connecting two 6-inch sanitary leads from the new building into the existing sanitary lead by way of direct connection, and then the main feed is directly to the sanitary sewer in the northeast quadrant of the site. We don't have any concerns at this point other than the applicant or the contractor, when they get on site, cleaning the existing lead, verifying that it is still functioning properly, and making sure that everything is still in conformance with the current standards of the site. The main concern when we looked at the preliminary plans was when the applicant came back and submitted the site, they had removed the underground detention pond that was previously kind of worked to get into the site during the previous approval. But with this new submittal, the applicant has integrated a underground detention basin, as you can see there on the eastern side of the site. The current layout conforms to the Wayne County Stormwater Management Plan or conditions or requirements. However, the Van Buren Township, as we've talked a lot in this commission, are a bit more stringent than Wayne County, just based on Van Buren being flat and wet and trying to contain all the water on site as long as possible. So this isn't something that needs to be done at this point in the review process. However, we do like to make sure that the applicant knows that they will still be held to the standards of Van Buren Township stormwater management. And really what we've been doing is just having them compare both Wayne County and the Van Buren Township standards and taking the most stringent of those requirements and adopting them for their design. That is one of our conditions as part of our letter. And then obviously, I'm not sure where the applicant is with the Wayne County process as far as comments from the county. However, as always, prior to us going into the engineering review process, we do require that the applicant has received at least a initial review and gotten initial comments from the county prior to us going through the engineering review process. As Ms. Krishnan mentioned, we did look at the traffic turning movements on site. We had a comment in here that they should be cleaned up a little bit. Some of the turning movements don't show full compliance, or they show their trucks kind of driving over the curb and a few things like that. I don't see anything that turns any red flags, but we would like to see that cleaned up to make sure that these vehicles can move around the site. Other than that, I mean, this is what we would consider a pretty well put together preliminary site plan. Until they get planning approval, we don't dive too deep into stormwater management. There's some stuff that they can clean up and will clean up as they get into engineering. But with that, at this point, Fishbeck recommends that the Planning Commission grant the multi-use building preliminary site plan approval based on engineering feasibility, subject to our conditions and comments listed in our March 29th, 2023 letter, and also with the condition that the county approval or county comments get back to us prior to us conducting a full engineering review. With that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Director Power, do you have anything to finish up?
I just want to refer you to the Fire Marshal / Deputy Fire Chief's letter dated March 22nd. His comments boil down to some comments on water supply, fire department access, and emergency responder radio coverage. So I'll go through those comments. The first one is that in the letter dated March 7th from Stonefield, the contractor is to perform a flow test to confirm a minimum 1,500 gallon per minute flow rate, and the flow test will need to be witnessed by the Van Buren Township Fire Marshal or his designee, and the results sent to the Fire Marshal's office. With respect to fire department access, all fire department concerns have been addressed in the March 7th letter from Stonefield. And with respect to emergency radio coverage can be field verified at the time of a final building inspection.
Okay, thank you. And now, do we have the applicant for a presentation?
Afternoon, or good evening, members of the Planning Commission.
Not afternoon
Yeah.
anymore, sir.
Woke up, but thank you for all the kind comments. This is a site that we've been working particularly pretty hard at. I appreciate a lot of the comments and the responsiveness you have showed, and even the patience. You know, this, again, as I mentioned, has been a pretty tough site to work on, but it's one we're committed to, and we've engaged a pretty experienced team here with J&H and Stonefield. We felt the prior engineers had a little more difficulty navigating the county's requirements, which is why we worked with Stonefield, who's very experienced with what the county was looking for. As for a couple of the comments real quick, and then I'll turn it over to the team here. We do also own a company called Safety & Oil Company, which is a fuel haul distributor. We've been in business for over 30 years. We've owned this parcel here for greater than 20 years. Long-term tenant here and property owner in Van Buren. But we are planning on staggering the delivery dates All of our sites have what we call a automatic feed ordering system. So we know exactly what's in the tanks and at what time they're going to run out based on different calculations. So much of the deliveries for sites like this are typically handled between the slowest hours. This would be a 24-hour site, so it would be probably from the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. marker, outside of the operating hours of the proposed drive-through restaurant that'll be in there. So hopefully that addresses your concern. As for a couple of your other comments with the lighting and even the canopy, we own 65 C-store gas stations throughout southeast Michigan, and some do have the HIP canopy and so forth, kind of what we originally proposed in the past, but those have been nothing but problems, absolute nightmares. Maintenance on them are awful, and it's like you don't want to reinvent the wheel. These flat canopies, they drain better. So what we've done is we've just beefed up the canopy columns to give it a more upgraded feel. And hopefully that'll be sufficient for you as well. But, we work with the brand image specifically on kind of with mobile as to the outer perimeter of the illumination and things like that. And they do a pretty good job vetting and kind of putting together the imaging. So I feel like that will represent pretty well and illuminate on the property altogether. But as far as everything else goes, I'll turn it over to Stonefield and to J&H here. But thanks again for your time.
Good evening, everyone. Eric Williams with Stonefield Engineering and Design. So I think between myself and Jay, we're going to try to touch on Vidya and Paul's comments and just kind of confirm that we are in agreement with everything. So I think to start with the stop bar question, that is strictly just paint on the ground, just to indicate where they should stop. Obviously, if that cross access is ever made, we want to make sure that there's clear delineation of where you should stop prior to moving. Mike's hit hours of delivery. As far as the removal of the one parking space, I believe, and this is actually the landscape plan where there was some conflict. So we have no issue with removing the one parking space that's currently shown as a patio in this drawing. So we'll clean that up, and that's not a problem. Employee marking on the space next to the dumpster, again, that's simply signage. We have no issues with that. I think that hits Vidya's stuff in terms of engineering. Just to maybe highlight and provide Paul with a little bit of feedback. So we did have a team on site. They televised the sanitary sewers, the storm sewers, and they did clean them. So we'll get that information over to you, hopefully before the end of the week here. We understand the stormwater management requirements, so we will go back and just update that and make sure we pick the stricter of the two. We have also received a Wayne County review, so similarly, we'll send that over to you, and you can hopefully get started on your review. And I would just add, the county had no objections to us maintaining the current access. We are reconstructing them to a certain extent, but general location that you see today is going to remain as is. And then I think maybe to touch on the last comment about truck turning exhibits, I did notice there was one that clearly ran over a curb line coming out of this particular driveway. There's plenty of room to update it. And then I believe some of the other line work that you may be seeing is actually the vehicle overhang. So not necessarily the wheelbase, but obviously fire trucks do have, I honestly don't know, maybe 18 inches of vertical clearance from the ground to the vehicle. So there isn't the ability to swing over the curb line without any real issue. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Jay, and we obviously appreciate your time this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Jay Noonan with J&A Architects and Engineers. We've tried to make a significant improvements, not only to the landscape plan, but to the building. I'd like to address some of the issues that came up by the planner in regards to the parking space. We've agreed that we can eliminate that unnecessary parking space so that we can accommodate this connectivity, and it's also a wonderful community seating area so that not only the customers of the property can participate and use this particular site, but also residents that are going up and down have access to that particular little pavilion, if you will. It doesn't have a roof on it. So that's a really nice feature, and we try to accommodate that in the zoning ordinance. One of the issues that was mentioned was your ordinance calls for a 10-foot buffer. We, because of the proximity of the building and its adjacency to, oops, did I do that?
No, I did that, I'm sorry. I'm trying to zero in on the image that I think you're looking for, so just bear with me.
But while we're bringing that up, you guys called for a 10-foot, I believe, buffer. We provide a 6 and a 5. We are providing the adequate amount of landscaping, as you've indicated. We do appreciate you recognizing that. So we had to make a strategic decision. What's more important, the buffer along 94 or the two primary roads, or these abutting buffers, which we felt we could create the kind of separation with landscaping. So that's what we've done, okay? In regards to photometrics, we do understand, we have some improvements to make. We will be adding some additional fixtures to the property, and we will be working within the requirements of your photometrics in your ordinance. So that, we will accommodate that. We have made some real strides with the building itself. It is a contemporary building. It's more of a building that you'd see in the late 2000s. It's got cast concrete. It does have a lot of brick now. We do have we have an example I thought we had of one of the renderings up here. I have actually a rendering right here, if you don't mind. I'd like to bring it. I'd like to come a little closer, if you would. We've added a substantial amount of brick here on the facade of the building, and some special detailing where we've done some banding. We've done some soldier courses of brick. We've also done, it's maybe a little hard to see, but we've done some cast concrete banding below the windows, okay? This is way above and beyond the standard that you're going to see in most corporate architecture for a mobile gas station, which I would hope would fit in for what we're trying to, you might see in a premier community, another in southeastern Michigan.
First upscale mobile gas station, just like the first Walmart.
Smart, yeah.
Michael will have an upscale mobile gas station in an upscale community. We've added some materials that are very permanent. They don't need maintenance. We have Nichi panels and fiber cement products. They're very standard fare in modern construction today. The color palette, we try to use a varying color palette so that the building has some real architectural interest. You know, it's not your ho-hum cookie cutter, if you will, design. The owner has specifically asked us to work without, a gabled shingle roofs. That was one request, but as Lydia had mentioned, we have made some real serious strides in terms of the architecture.
Could I have you back to the microphone so that they can pick you up on?
Absolutely.
The meeting is televised.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going through my notes. I just want to make sure I've covered everything here.
Could you please explain the architecture of the canopy columns? Because it's not colored, it's difficult to figure out how exactly it ties into your building design.
These aren't columns, these are suspension cables.
Right, the gas station, the canopy columns, what are they?
Yes. Here, this is all brick.
Okay.
And the soldier coursing that you see at the top here will be darker color than the brick body, which will be the same on the building, there's a better example of this. The colors look, far more representative on this than they do, unfortunately, on the screen there. What we've done here is create a sculptural cube, and we've carved things out of it. So it has more of it has a more of a sculptural look. You know, I'm getting a little highfalutin architecture here, but we're not trying to create a traditional, gabled roofs and that sort of thing. That's not what the client was looking for, and that's not what we've created. So I have recommended, we have started today to add some small banding, which we've looked into some of the mobile standards, so that we can enhance the top of the canopies to give it a little more character. That character will be reflected in being complementary to the building's architecture, to itself, all right? So that's what we would like to do in that regard. With that, I don't think I have anything else, and I'd be happy to answer any other specific questions that the board may have.
Yes.
Question, since the owner is there, please do let the planning commission know that the non-conforming sign is going to come down, because we never seem to discuss that. I want the planning commission to hear it, so it's not something, we're
Sure.
just discussing back and forth.
No,
with
no,
neighbors.
and I completely understand where you're coming from. We would like to keep the sign, and the reason for it is purely because of visibility. You know, this is a gas station off of the freeway. It's this place, we've kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not it was warranted to redevelop. And frankly, we've come to the conclusion that this warrants a redevelopment site. So the stormwater retention has been quite costly, only just to be able to work with the county and get them exactly what they're looking for. You know, that highway sign has been there for 30 years. We've done a great job maintaining it. I think it'll continue to be a good thing. It'll actually help drive traffic, which is ultimately, at the end of the day, our goal. The more cars we see, the more money we hopefully will make. But, you know, frankly, I can't really understand the reasoning outside of it being non-conforming as to what benefit it would bring to the community. If you can share that with me, I'm happy to hear you out.
It is a commercially zoned site, so it is an existing non-conforming sign. So typically, whenever sites undergo redevelopment or updating, we try to get non-conformities eliminated, because that is the goal of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. Non-conformities on sites must be eliminated. Just because something has remained non-conforming doesn't mean you need to prolong its life. That said, I will defer to the Planning Commission on this one. I know where you're coming from, and for you, for visibility. So it is still a legal non-conforming sign. The Planning Commission typically does recommend elimination of non-conforming signs. However, you could make the determination if you want to allow the applicant to, I'll leave it up to the Planning Commission to make that determination. So that's the reason behind us recommending, because non-conformities are supposed to be eliminated. So we make this comment on every single site plan that comes before us. So I had to bring it up in my letter.
And I appreciate you doing that. The only, I guess, feedback I'd provide to the Planning Commission is, again, as I mentioned, this was a site that we've kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not it warranted a redevelopment. So I kind of struggle with that a little bit, only because, you know, if we did nothing and just turned the lights on and began to operate as it is right now, it'd do the city the township no benefit, nor really us, because we've shown that redevelopment opportunities have provided an ultimate benefit. That's why we're doing this. But, you know, if we do this, would that mean the sign could remain? And if so, I don't quite understand the correlation.
Planning Commission?
Are we on discussion?
We're on discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
On July 22nd of 2020, this applicant received a special use permit. It was conditional upon preliminary site plan, all conditions of preliminary site plan approval being met. The preliminary site plan was approved on May 12th, 2021. A specific condition was removal of the existing non-conforming pole sign on the site in the meeting minutes. It was agreed to. It's already done. That ship has sailed. If the applicant wishes to reopen that discussion, then it won't be a continuation of an existing plan. it will be a starting over with the special use, because they haven't met the terms of the special use, because they agreed and we approved a preliminary site plan conditional upon the pole sign being taken down. I appreciate you're a different developer now, you're a different site planner, but that's the history. And since this is a continuation, and that was a specific condition of the special use, you can't not take the site down without violating the terms of the special use, and then it has to go back and be rediscussed as a new issue. I'm not saying it wouldn't be okay to go back and discuss it as a new issue, but them's the breaks. That's how it went down.
Thank you. I had not thought to check the meeting minutes, but if it was conditioned upon the conditional land use, it's binding unless you revisit it.
It is binding, and I will add that in the meeting where we went over this preliminary site plan, specifically in the minutes, is the chairperson asking and reiterating, you understand that the pylon sign has to come down, and the applicant agreed that it would be coming down. And that's why we granted the preliminary site plan at the time. This being a continuation, it's still a condition, and it was already voted on.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Were you commissioner at that time? Or,
Was I commissioner at that?
yeah.
I was sitting right here, I think.
Chairman, I believe.
No, I was not.
Oh,
No, I was
okay. Any other discussion?
I'm sorry, just if I could interject for a moment. You know, again, when we bought this property, part of the nostalgia of owning a store or a gas station off the highway is access and visibility. And as a part of visibility, you need to have a highway sign. Take, for example, Love's or Pilot. They would not even entertain a moment coming to a township or a city that wouldn't allow them to have their large pylon signs with the digital boards up front. That's part of doing business as a gas station. It's one of those almost necessities, call it, just to enhance visibility. And I completely sympathize with exactly what you're saying. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend that meeting. However, I did appoint an authorized representative who did come in and unfortunately maybe talked a little bit out of what I've asked him to do, which is why he's no longer here and you see the two new faces. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could, I think we've gone. These guys have done a great job in trying to accommodate the new standards, not only put on by the township but also by the county. We've, matter of fact, the stormwater retention system is going to be nearly over $120,000 enhancement, call it, from the previous plan that we've submitted to this one. So I think we've shown good faith. And the only thing we've asked, while I understand your comment there, is to really just help us out a little bit here, because it really does make a difference having a pylon sign off the highway. It really does.
Reopen this. If we want to consider granting him, we have to reopen this, right? To a new special land use. Then from that, does he then have, because we've already granted that plus a temporary site plan or preliminary site plan, that he then would have to start to fall under our new regulations for gas stations? Does that open the whole can of worms?
That is correct. Because it was a part of a special land use condition, technically saying you want to keep the sign now means you don't want to abide by the old agreement, and special land use conditions are binding. You can ask for reconsideration, but like you said, you have to restart the process, and when you restart, you will be subjected to the gas station regulations. We have given the applicant the benefit of going under the old regulations because we continued the previous date of submission, original date of submission. And I do want to make a little comment.
Sure, please.
How frequently do you see Pilot and Lowe's gas stations anymore? They don't, because most communities don't want them. They don't want those signs. The newer gas stations, they do, but I think the way they get their business is, the MDOT's wayfinding signs. There are studies that have shown that the wayfinding signs, that's what they call wayfinding, they are extremely effective in directing businesses. That's where they say mobile, as soon as you get off the exit ramp, it is right there. So that is why in a lot of communities, if you see any of the newer gas stations that are built, they do not have those tall pylon signs because they're not allowed anymore. And you would be surprised how well you will do with a good ground monument sign. I know it's historically, tall signs have always been assumed to be like greater visibility, but in the recent years, when I say recent, at least in the past 2 decades, all the studies that have come, they've shown that that's not necessarily true anymore. Wayfinding signs have been more effective. I'm sure Director Power has read some of those studies also. They're really effective in helping your business succeed.
Sure, and we participate in those MDOT signs at almost all of our locations that warrant. And again, I won't take too much of your time on this discussion, but again, we're kind of part of the thought that revenue per square foot, right? And also, making use of real estate that you own. If there's no pylon sign there, there really isn't a way that we're enhancing what we have. And historically, we've always had it there. I figure, why not carry over? But the last thing I'll also touch on is our goal is to get this project kicked off tomorrow. That's what we want to do. So I'm not here to, if this is going to be another delay, this project has been riddled with delays, partly, maybe some of our team's doing, but more importantly, kind of what at the request of what the county's been asking for. So while we're kind of going back and asking you for things, we also have to please the county. And as Paul, I believe, just mentioned, there's going to be 2 standards here. You've got the Van Buren Township standard, and then you've got the county standards. It's not really business friendly. But what we have done in order to make sure that this project continues to progress, I've given Stonefield the green light to go ahead and outline a stormwater retention system that's going to cost us nearly $120,000 more from the previous plans, just to make sure that it's on board with both code and ordinances, or whatever the term is. So the only thing I ask you is, and again, I sympathize with everything that you're saying. I really don't see a material benefit of paying the cost to remove the sign and then ultimately not having a sign when it's been there for 30 years. We've maintained it since we've owned it, and I just hope you can kind of sympathize from a business owner standpoint as well.
I
Appreciate it.
I completely concur with you, but we're bound by law on what we have to do. And if we veer off of what's stated here,
Sure.
then it's going to induce delays to you.
Right.
We don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because it was put in and established the way it was, we have to follow through with that, or we begin the process all over again. And that...
It's a procedural conundrum. Even if they sympathize with you, the original thing that your representative agreed to has become binding, and it will cause delays, and you cannot be assured that the next time around it is investigated, that you will get the desired result, because the conditional land use is voted on by the Board of Trustees with a recommendation from Planning Commission. That said, you have such an attractive building, and now with what you're going to do to the canopy, it's going to be one of the prettiest gas station sites off the freeway. And people generally like going to those bright, well-lit sites. It's shown those sites are pretty successful. So
Absolutely. Well,
it's a decision you'll have to make. If you do want the sign, you'll have to restart the whole process, which is, as our consultants, we would not recommend that, because we think you're already 3/4 of the way through.
contractor that was ready to break ground actually April 1st, and then there were some delays here. So he's ready to go May 1st. I don't have time to delay. And, it's for both of our benefits. It's closed down store. I don't like owning a property that's closed down, being associated with it, not only in the communities we serve, but just purely from my standpoint. It's not the way to do it. And of course, there's a cost to it. So I don't want to have any delays. So if that's what you want us to do in order to continue to progress it, I don't see that I have much of a choice here. Perhaps maybe it's something I can explore after, as to seeing about maybe getting a variance later on. And I don't know how that works. How would that work in the future?
It's always an applicant's prerogative to apply for a variance, but the standards for sign variances are very stringent, and wouldn't want to direct you to a process where you might spend more money and then not be happy with the outcome. The
Sure.
standards for a variance review request are very, very stringent. And in this case, right off the bat, I cannot see you meeting at least 3 of the 5 standards that are there. I do ZBA trainings as part of it, as a certified instructor. So your site plan is in a good shape. So as soon as you get the Wayne County or whatever requirements to Paul, and Paul says final engineering is a go, your site plan preliminary conditions are very simple. I think you have real experienced team. They can turn it around in no time. What we can assure you from the township side is we will review it promptly and get you so you can keep to your timeline and building. But that sign will hold you up. You can always apply for a variance, but you might not get it.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, I want, like I said, the spirit is to keep this project progressing. We've done and made, hopefully, as you've recognized, thank you for doing that, substantial improvements to it in effort of, making sure that it does succeed, but also, hopefully it would have been keeping the sign, but unfortunately, that's not the case here, so.
Sorry. Yeah, that guy cost you more money in the end anyways, didn't he?
Hey, now.
And thank you for all your patience on this project. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion from the commission?
No.
Then do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Oh.
I'm
Oh,
voting-
we got public comments
Oh,
yet.
do we have public comments? I'm sorry,
Yes.
please, I don't want to step on the public comments. I was ready
No.
with a motion.
Do we have any comments from the public? Anything on Zoom?
No, there's no comments on Zoom.
Okay, then, do we want to take action on this?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Jar.
I move to grant the applicant Stonefield Engineering and Design on behalf of owner IS Real Estate LLC, Belleville Oil Company Incorporated, an amended preliminary site plan approval to demolish buildings on an existing gasoline station site and to construct a new convenience store with retail and food service, including a drive-through lane and 1 drive-through window, gasoline pumps and related site improvements at the site located at 11250 Haggerty Road, based on the analysis and subject to the conditions detailed in the McKenna letter dated March 23, 2023, Fishbeck letter dated March 29th, 2023, VBT fire report dated March 22nd, 2023, and the letter of staff dated April 6th, 2023, noting specifically the feedback and concerns about the pylon sign being a condition of the McKenna letter. It is to be removed.
Do we have support on the motion?
Support.
Do we have discussion on the motion? Could we call for a roll call vote, please?
Jackson Paul. Medina Atchison.
Yes.
Bernie Grant.
Yes.
Sherry Budd.
Yes.
Jeff Jar.
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes. Sorry about the sign situation, and thank you. I'm glad to see that moving forward. I've driven by that site for 40 years. Okay, that moves us ahead to item number 2, amended Camping World preliminary and final site plan review. The applicant, Camping World, is seeking amended preliminary and final site plan approval to demolish the east wing of their existing building and create a new RV parking and storage on site. The site is located at 43646 North Interstate Drive, Interstate Service Drive, tax parcel number 830600100001001 on the north side of I-94 Service Drive between DeWitt and Morton Taylor Roads. Presentation by applicant.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. The applicant I informed did not need to provide a new presentation tonight because this is a very minor amendment to the original site plan, and so I apologize for the error in the order of the agenda tonight.
No
Having
problem.
No planned presentation from the applicant.
So a presentation by township staff and consultants.
Sure. I'd like to, and go figure. I'll just try to summarize the history of the case. In December of 2020, the Planning Commission granted final site plan approval to largely identical site plan to what you see tonight. The idea is that the east wing of the Camping World business has been demolished to make way for outdoor RV sales and display. I really want to be able to show you on the screen. Don't know why I can't. But the plans had changed a number of times, which are summarized, I think, in my report to some extent, but certainly in Ms. Krishnen's report. And as of last summer, last June, the Planning Commission was considering a amendment to the site plan to allow a west wing addition to the building. That amendment was never acted upon. There was a postponement based on some information that the Planning Commission was seeking from the applicant on the nature of the addition and some of the automotive repair uses that were going to be proposed inside of that area. And so eventually in August or September of 2022, the applicant clarified that they were going to rescind those changes and go back to the original scope of their original plan. In doing so, they provided some additional detail to verify that they were not going to need to fire suppress the existing building footprint. So here you go. Here's the December 2020 plan and the April 2023 plan. Over the past several months since September of last year, as I was saying, the fire suppression design had been reviewed by the fire marshal / deputy fire chief, and some minor changes had been proposed around the site, which are noted on there's a markup sheet here that notes some of the minor site plan changes from the original approved plan, including the relocation of or removal of a transformer, some adjustments to the sanitary lead design on the west edge of the property. There was a note previously about removal of a dock door on the rear of the building that no longer is occurring, and a new dumpster enclosure, and then some other minor adjustments that are noted in the staff reports from our planning consultant and township engineer. This is a very minor amendment to the original plan that is really a continuing construction project. You saw the building construction begin in the first half of 2021. All of the stormwater detention has already been installed. Since that time, Camping World has proposed a number of changes, and they've circled back to the original design more or less. So that's the nature of the review tonight. I advised Camping World that they did not need to present their changes. They're pretty evident in the materials that are presented to you, but because our consultants had been tracking this closely and providing good detailed review, I wanted to give a chance for them to provide their comments on the updates. So this is labeled in your agenda as an amended preliminary and final site plan review for Camping World, and so we'll review it in that way. So with that said, I will turn this over to Vidya Krishnan for the planning reports, and then Paul Kamer for the engineering report.
Thank you, Director Power. As you can see in the summary of our letter, this project has been before you numerous times. Original approval, then amendment number 1, amendment number 2, amendment number 3 in May of last year, at which time the project got stuck a little bit because they wanted to put in a paint booth, and paint booths were classified as major automotive repair, and the Planning Commission asked for some clarification. I do want to note on the record that there were lots of rumors out there that I heard of that said that the township is delaying Camping World, which is very, very untrue, because Director Power has been relentlessly trying to reach out to Camping World since May of last year, asking, would you like to resubmit so we can get you back to the Planning Commission? They have been radio silent. So it is not for lack of trying on the township's part. We were keen to get the site fixed up and open, but somehow the news spread that the township is not granting approvals. No, the township was literally waiting for them to say what they wanted to do, which took about a year for them to decide, close to a year. So at this time, we are back to the original plan that you approved in 2020, which was a good design. So the zoning is C2, Extensive Highway Business District. They're demolishing a portion of the existing building, keeping the remaining, adding in new RV parking, doing landscaping improvements, adding sidewalk connections, and fencing. So the location of the curb cuts is as was shown on the original plan. Because this is a very secure facility, they don't provide cross-access to neighboring properties. It's not safe for them to have people going through their RV lot, which is fine, which the Planning Commission agreed to. Existing sidewalk along the frontage of the I-94 service drive, they are providing a sidewalk connector and brick paver walkway with a crosswalk straight into the building to improve pedestrian connectivity, which they proposed for. All of their parking spaces meet the ordinance standards for striping and for dimensions. They meet all of our landscaping standards, and they did a really good job on their original landscape plan. Tree removal permit, at this time, it does not involve removal of any trees. It's all an existing sites that's being reworked, so no tree removal permit required. Stormwater detention, I will defer to the township engineer, but since they have been through so much, I think they already had their engineering done before they decided to change everything. So go back to what was good. And then the lighting plan, couple of detailed items were not included in this set, but they were shown on the original plan, fixture locations and the fixture design. That sheet was missing in the submittal. So they just need to add that sheet back into the submittal for administrative review. They have told us that it's going to be the exact same thing as was previously approved. So just the sheet. The dumpster, as Director Power mentioned, is going to be on the northeast side of the building. It's going to use the back wall. It meets the ordinance standards and it has access. Chain link, black vinyl coated chain link fence for the rear and side
I
yards.
apologize. Do not disturb mode was on for a solid 2 hours.
So black vinyl coated chain link fence for the rear and side yards, which the Planning Commission had previously approved, but a 2.5-foot high decorative fence along the site's frontage, which is what our ordinance allows for the C2 Highway Business District. And that was an attractive fence also, which was part of the previous site plan. With regard to signs, any new wall sign needs to be submitted to Director Power for approval prior to installation. So as I mentioned, the plan has been before you numerous times. At this time, they're going back to what was good and well-designed at the start. So our recommendation is for you to reapprove preliminary and final site plan approval to the original site plan for Camping World located at 43646 I-94 North Service Drive, subject to the 3 conditions that are listed in our review letter dated April 5th of 2023.
Mr. Kamer.
Yes, thank you. So as Director Power mentioned, and I'm not going to read through my letter, and actually the letter was really just an email that we had been going back and forth with the applicant because our comments were so few. But Director Power, if you could go to the next map just to show what exactly changed. So as far as engineering is concerned, if you take the west edge of the building or the left edge of the building, everything to the right, to the east, has been completed. So all the underground detention, anything engineering-wise. So when they came back to us with this newest update, the only additional item that they had engineering-wise is if you see the purple line along the western, that is the sanitary service line. And during their construction, they realized or found out that it was in poor condition. So they're just replacing it. And we had the comment that you'll read in here, we had a comment about them having enough cleanouts on the service line. Additionally, the only engineering portions that haven't been done is the western lot over there has not been paved, and thus the stormwater detention, or I'm sorry, the stormwater system, catch basins and the lines for 2 of those outlets have not been installed. However, nothing has changed, nothing is changing. Everything is going back to the previously approved site plan. The other comment that we had really was just a follow-up on a previous condition, and that is the water main that runs along the southern portion of the property line along the I-94 service drive is currently on the property for Camping World. And over the last couple of years, we've been doing our due diligence to get all these water mains and township infrastructure assets in easements, because there are a lot of easements that were never collected back in the day. So one of our comments, now that they've had 2 years to look up whether or not there's an easement on site, They have discovered there is no easement on site, so we're requiring them to provide an easement for the existing water main. It's not a new water main, existing water main that's on site. So we've had conversations with their engineers. They are accepting of all of our conditions, and we don't have any other conditions other than for them to let us know when they get back out there so we can inspect the work that was ongoing 2 summers ago. So with that, we recommend the Planning Commission give the amended preliminary and final site plan approval based on engineering feasibility or engineering conditions from our letter dated April 6th, 2023.
Thank you. Director Power?
Yes,
Comment on
the fire marshal's report.
Marshal?
Yes, the fire marshal, as I said, had been taking a closer look at this, even though it is the same building plan as was approved in 2020. There were enough changes to the layout that went back and forth that they wanted to take a fresh look at the fire suppression design inside the building. So the architect has provided adequate fire separation within the building to not require any further changes regarding fire suppression. So there were some comments on a building plan-based review letter, which in bold at the bottom, the fire marshal has mentioned all listed concerns have been addressed in the latest submittal, and that letter is dated February 21st, 2023. Otherwise, as far as site design, the fire marshal had been satisfied with site design issues dating back to February of 2020. So you can see that letter in the report as well, but the fire marshal's concerns have been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any discussion from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Jarr?
Mr. Cammer, all of your conditions are detailed in your letter, yes? That's my only question, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners? Are we going to move forward on this issue?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Jarr?
I move to grant the applicant Camping World preliminary and final site plan approval to demolish the east wing of their existing building and create a new RV parking and storage on the site as per the plan approved in December of 2020 at the site located at 436, shoot, what's the address?
43646.
43646 North Interstate Service Drive. Based on the analysis and subject to the conditions detailed in the McKenna letter dated April 5th, Fishbeck Engineering letter dated April 6th, 2023, Van Buren Fire Report, February 21st, 2023, and the letter from staff dated April 6th, 2023. I humbly submit for your support.
Do we have motion by Commissioner Jarr, support by Treasurer Bud? Could we have a roll call or any discussion on the motion?
Thank God.
Dana.
I heard it was going to be a church.
Okay.
I'm really excited that it's coming back.
Yes, let's get it underway. So let's go. Roll call vote, please.
Bernie Grant. Sherry Budd.
I certainly want to see him move forward on this project, and I hope it gets completed, yes.
Paul. Jeff Jar.
Yes.
And I second that, yes. Okay, item number 3, discussion of residential zoning ordinance text amendment. The Planning Commission will be requested to begin consideration of a zoning ordinance text amendment to allow building height to be limited to the more restrictive of the following standards under section 3.106D of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. 30 feet in height, 2.5 stories, as amended from the current limit of 2 stories. Presentation from staff. Director Power?
Mr. Chair, realizing this is kind of an open-ended discussion topic, I'll defer to the chair and the Planning Commission, kind of what our cutoff is tonight. I do want to mention that this process was initiated after we had a request for a home to be built with 2.5 stories instead of 2 stories. Based on administrative staff review of that request, we realized that there was an issue in the zoning ordinance that had to be addressed where we do not allow residential homes to be built with 2.5 stories. So on a parallel track, the case that prompted this review actually received a variance at last night's BZA meeting to allow a 2.5-story home to be constructed. I just want to mention, as an outcome of that meeting, there were a few requests, and Commissioner Jar, who's a liaison to the BZA, can verify this or refine the comments on it.
Would you like me to
Would you want to go ahead and state those? Yes, please, feel free.
The BZA, the chairman, Mr. Herman of the BZA, asked us and directed us to please consider an ordinance change allowing clarification and a 2.5-story height limit in the residential districts. Please also consider that that this 2.5-story limit should apply to additions to houses as well as to new construction. And last night, he also directed us to consider the possibility, after having read a consulting report, that maybe we should consider raising the overall height of the building up to 35 feet. They'd previously indicated that the BZA was not interested in seeing any potential raising of the height, but as of last night, they had asked us to certainly please look at that as a possibility. And in my role as board representative, I said I would relay that information to the Planning Commission. I believe I relayed that accurately.
I believe you did.
Thank you, sir.
And just to add on to that, after the last discussion on this on March 22nd, we asked our planning consultant to provide some analysis based on some study of some other communities. And there's a memo from Vidya Krishnan in your report to that effect. And you can see some of the, so what you see on the screen is an excerpt from that report, which shows some of the comparison community data from Northville, Plymouth, Pittsfield, Ypsilanti, and Superior Townships with some of their height in feet and stories limits. And these are actually images of 2.5-story assessed homes in Van Buren Township as assessed by our assessor's office. So just to give you a visual representation of some of the existing, presumably non-conforming 2.5-story homes. But Ms. Krishnan, please feel free to go through the findings in your report.
Thank you, Director Power. I want to keep this as an informal discussion because this is a new topic that is coming before the Planning Commission thanks to that request for a single-family home. Typically, we don't review single-family home plans, so when this came before Director Power and he's like, wait a minute, like what's going on over here? And I was very surprised that you basically cannot, technically based on the way our ordinance is right now written, you cannot convert the attic into living space because if the attic spans more than half of the floor below it, it now becomes a story, which, taking away a lot of living space within the same height, it did not make logical sense. And I was surprised that I was sure that there are homes that actually have that space, so which means we have a lot of non-conforming homes out there that we don't even know about, which, from the outside, those are all attractive, nice-looking houses, and they're not like massive as in imposing over the neighbor, like you would think 2.5 stories is going to be really imposing. Those are homes that are commonly built too. And for growing families, it creates living space within the same height. And once we started looking at the height, we realized that some of the municipalities have 35 feet as their single-family residential height. Some others do have it lower, like for instance, the city of Rochester is 25 feet. But then again, the way the pitch of the roof is regulated, you can easily get to 35 feet just based upon being architecturally creative. So, but some communities like Northville, they don't even tell you how many stories. They just say feet and you put in based upon your ceiling heights. Some people want only 2 stories because they want taller ceilings. Others would rather have the living space and they would do, Director Power, what is the minimum required under building code? 9-foot ceilings?
I know there's a I think it's a 7.5-foot clearance for a head space. I can't.
So that would give you like,
Between 7 and 9.
7.5 foot, then with the ceiling joists and all that, 2.5 stories would give you reasonable living room. So what we have presented before you basically is an analysis of comparable communities. I didn't want to take a community that has got lots that were created in 1940s, 50s, and all the lots are 50 by 100, because that won't truly reflect who we are. We do have larger lots also, so we have to compare ourselves to communities that have similar lot sizes and shapes. And these are some of our neighbors, and those are our regulations. So basically looking for planning commission feedback. I mean, is there any picture, any of these pictures that Director Power has compiled for you? Is anything that is like, really, this is not what we want to see? Or is there, you have preference one way or the other? Because based upon what your thoughts are, we will draft up an ordinance and bring it before you, so we don't get stuck in a situation where I was frankly surprised when Director Power showed me that plan. I was like, okay, so what's the problem? So he said they can't build this. So I was like, okay.
That's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. So if just looking for guidance from you as to where you would like us to go from here.
I really like the fact that we're starting to look at other communities and what they're doing, instead of just continuing to do the same things we're doing. Again, here's oh my goodness, they can't build a house.
Yeah.
And now it's opening us up to see, we have an issue and somebody wants to build a house, and of course we want them to build a house. I was very interested as to why you had mentioned at the BZA meeting, the chairman said, look at 35, because I don't ever remember this coming before the BZA.
I can answer?
Yes.
The BZA was given a copy of the McKenna memorandum.
Oh, okay.
And read it.
Yeah.
And, and liked what they saw and felt that other communities had 35, and maybe that was a reasonable thing to consider. It wasn't a directive to adopt, but it was a directive to consider.
Because the BZA usually will point out things to us, so it made me wonder, like, how did they come up with that? Because they usually don't get these letters, right? They don't
This
get.
time they got it, and I did read the conclusions into the BZA meeting on your behalf, Ms. Krishnan, because I thought they were very well written.
How do we currently figure height, maximum height? Isn't it half the distance from the peak to the?
Of the gable.
Yep,
That's the peak.
for most homes which are gable roofs, you measure at the average grade at the front of the house to the midpoint between the eave and the peak.
It's actually spelled out for at least 5 different roof types in the Code of Ordinances. It is roughly considered to be halfway between the end of the gables and the peak. And there's a
roughly,
different
yeah.
measure for flat roofs. But it's called out for like mansard roofs and gable roofs, and there are different measuring standards for each one.
Director Power, we do have a definition for walkout basements, right? Because that's sometimes the concern comes that, is that a full story? Because then from the lakeside, the mass looks higher.
So,
Yes.
Ordinance.
Know it better than me
The
at this
ordinance,
point.
I was just in the meeting last night. The height is measured from the front of the house, not from the back or not from a median around. It's spelled out as being from the front of the house. So if it was a walkout basement, it could actually be from the bottom of that walkout basement to the top peak. It looks to me like the ordinance says it could be in excess of 30 feet, as long as in
But
the
I was
front.
thinking, yes,
it's-
as
yeah.
long as the front, because if you look at lakeside properties, typically the property would slope down towards the
Yes.
lake. So if you measure it from the front side, it might be 35, but you might end up 40 plus. One of the other ordinances that I administer is City of Orchard Lake Village, where they build those big mansions on the waterfront. Their ordinance says that if you have a walkout basement on the lakeside or other side, it can be 10 feet higher, because they give you the accommodation for the walkout story. Because they measure it at the front too, so.
that question is relevant in terms of stories as well, and I want to
Yes.
point that out. So our ordinance also has in its definition of a story, whether a half story would include a walkout, or whether a basement would be included as part of the story count, as well as a half story at the top level. The basement, I'm going to just really generalize the definition. There is a verbatim definition you can read, but it basically just has to do with how much is exposed above grade. So if you have a walkout basement, generally that's going to be less than half of the floor, and it's not going to count as a story in terms of our
Put on
ordinances.
3 sides and has just one side exposed, okay.
More than half buried, I think, is kind of the intent.
No, I was just going to say, I was wondering how they calculate are Northville, Plymouth, and Pittsfield all calculating the heights the same way?
Typically, yes.
Okay,
Typically,
okay.
the height of a pitched or a gable roof is always measured. The definition is standard across most zoning ordinances.
I was wondering, because I thought you made a comment that it was at Ypsilanti that measures theirs differently.
No, I mentioned like Northville is 35 feet, but they don't care how many you put in over there. Oh, what I mentioned, that was the city of Rochester, because they
Okay.
have narrower lots. They say lower building height, but then the lots are narrower, so the pitch of the roofs are higher to give them greater.
Do we,
And Ms. Krishnan, you weren't able to find any examples where a community changed from a two-story up to a higher story in situ, so that we didn't, you looked, you
No.
couldn't see any.
We looked. In fact, I said Gage, my associate, looking
Yes.
far and wide. He said, I never saw anywhere where they actually transitioned into it. And that's an interesting planning thing, because we generally come across planning concepts all the time, and we share our knowledge, what happened in your community.
Yes.
Internally, we discuss, and so we put out a note. We said, has anybody encountered a municipality where you have actually had the switch? And they're like, no. And that's interesting, because we set off everybody talking about building height at that point, like, so is a half story a bad thing? I mean, why would it be a bad thing if the height is the same? Is 30 feet a good height? Maybe 35 feet is not so bad. So,
Thanks, I think I know that's what I had hoped you would be able to shed some light on, and hey, if we're the first one to go do it, then okay. You know,
do we want to send any information to our planners to develop and adjust this? And do we want to consider stay at 30 feet? Do we want to consider 35?
Just wonder, just a thought, maybe somebody only wants to build 30. Could we give them that, you can build between 30 and 35?
Oh,
So
yeah.
that,
you can build anything less than that. You can build a ranch story.
Yeah.
That's the max.
If-
You
if
can
it was
build
two-story.
just a single-story ranch home, and that would be probably, with your ceiling heights, probably 15 or 18 feet to the midpoint of the peak max, even if you had tall ceilings. That would be the max. You can build anything less than that as long as you meet the building code.
Okay, I just got concerned because we have to have a minimum of, the footage, the square feet per house, so I thought, okay. All right.
there are some communities or some developments in PRDs where they require that if you're going to have 2.5-story or really tall buildings, you can't put a really tall 3-story building or 2.5-story building next to a 1-story. You don't want it standing proud, but I don't think we need that here. I don't feel like that's something that we need to have in the ordinance, especially if it's general residential.
Those kind of challenges come more in very old historic neighborhoods where you have these historically significant structures, and then somebody just builds and buys an lot, demolishes the home, and suddenly builds this towering structure, and now you're casting shadows on this house, and you're minimizing something. So those kind of rules are more stringent in areas where you have historic structures historic homes you want to
And
preserve.
our ordinances already have safeguards for
Yes.
maintaining aesthetic similarity.
Yes.
And I don't know what the verbiage is, but you know what I
That
mean.
section is really well written too, about significantly different so that each home has its character. That section of the ordinance is very well written.
I'd be interested in seeing some draft ordinance to make this change.
And I think the 35, 2.5 would be good.
I think 35, 2.5 is certainly worth exploring, and let's see what it says. I can't think of why that extra 5 feet is.
We'll get you more pictures too of 35 feet, 2.5 stories, and the ones that are on a slope, so you know what it looks like if it's got. We should be able to find those pictures for you, because more than numbers, I think a picture gives you a clear idea of what it's going to look like. We can do that.
It's a lot of deliberation, but boy, it seems reasonable. It seems like the reasonable thing to do. So if you need a formal direction to go get some draft ordinance written up, I could make you a motion, or you could.
Request just an addition to that, that direction for staff. So I do wonder if you're interested in us looking at agricultural and estates zoning in addition to the R1 zoning, because those are, that's a significant portion of the township that is also primarily occupied by single-family homes as the principal structure on those parcels. It's an agricultural district, but it's also a residential district, so I wonder if we want to look at that as well.
I feel that when you're on an acre of land or more, you're not really influencing or affecting your neighbors the way you are in those other zonings. So I see them being more liberal to their, personally, more liberal to theirs.
I think the commission is looking for single-family dwellings,
Yeah.
not just single-family districts. So I think single-family dwellings will have the standard, whichever district, so ag and estates would come into that.
Yes, that's what I wanted to clarify.
I think
'cause
that's
it-
okay. I would absolutely be in favor of that, looking at ag district or just single-family homes in general. And, you know, we're asking you to come up with some draft ordinance, I'm sure. Since we like to talk, we'll probably talk about it for a long time before we get it done. But I would like to direct that if
That's fine.
amenable.
Yes. Do we need that in a motion of any type?
I think we got it.
Just a suggestion? Okay. General discussion and updates, any updates?
General discussion.
General discussion?
Was the Myers sign package administratively approved? Thank you. That's it.
And we can put on the next available BZA agenda if there's a rescission or a withdrawal of that variance request.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks very nice. I saw that the signs were going up. I knew they were going up.
That is exactly my point. They came and tried to ask for a variance because it was easy to ask for a variance, but the moment they didn't get the variance, they designed just beautiful signs that'll work for their business.
They look beautiful, and that Myers project is coming along really well. It really looks nice.
Philosophy is if variances are easily granted, let me just shoot, I can get a bigger sign, but no, you're not getting it. They're like, okay, we'll design it to meet the ordinance. Could have done that and saved yourself the money of coming to the ZBA, but okay.
Any other discussion? Commissioner,
Up this evening, maybe we should start talking about the ordinance relative to temporary outlot commercials, businesses.
I think that is
In
a,
the B-Rod, in the B-Rod district specifically, or just?
I would say maybe both.
Outlet commercial,
Well, I don't know if you want to call it outlet, but in commercial retail
okay.
lots.
Probably revisit the temporary land uses to see what the definition of temporary is. What is short-term temporary, long-term temporary? What is a seasonal use? Maybe we need to
Well,
revisit all of those.
Yeah, not only that, but maybe moving forward with commercial developments that if they expect to be providing businesses like that a place in their lots, that maybe those lots need to have special landscaping and paving requirements, maybe even power supplied to them.
Did he not say that he was getting rent from this?
Oh, he is.
So
He's not doing it for free.
charging him rent.
That much, and we don't know what it is, but he said he wasn't getting that much.
It's still, I think he's still getting paid for it,
Yeah, because
regardless of the amount.
He mentioned it in one of them, and I forgot what the amount was, but I thought it was.
He's not bringing it in for the benefit of his other tenants. He's bringing it in because he's going to make money off of it.
You know, I would like to sit there one day, because I can't
No,
believe they're
he's
gonna
not.
get 30 customers in a day.
My
There'll be
opinion,
a lot of calls to Wayne County if
Yeah.
there are that many broken windshields because of
Right.
flying chips.
opinion-
As a general discussion on that point, though, and like Medina was talking about earlier in the meeting, we really should go back and look at our Belleville Road overlay district and
Yeah.
shore up that area
Agree.
around pop-up tents. And is that okay? If it's okay, great.
Right,
If
I
it's not
agree.
okay, if there are special standards, now that it's been brought to us and it's been brought to our attention, I think we owe it to our residents to figure out what our plan will be going forward so that we don't have these.
While we look at accommodating businesses so that, it helps them survive and make money too,
Yeah.
maybe we need to visit the section of the ordinance that allows special land uses as temporary land uses.
That
That
too.
defeats the whole purpose of why it's a special land
Right.
use.
I mean, that's what I was alluding to. I'd really like to see that because that was one of my major concerns on the item one this evening was how can we bypass the special land use
Right.
rules? I wasn't very comfortable with that. I just like it written down. We can write those rules so that next time it's clear and people know what the expectation is and that we don't have to have multiple hours of meetings to discuss it. And then when we're looking at the Belleville Road Overlay District, I appreciate it's like 15 years old. We have a lot of aesthetic standards that were put into it 15 years ago. Is red brick still a common, cheap building material that everybody can easily access? I mean, there are a lot of fiber panels now. Do we want to maybe think about
Newer building materials which are not brick but are just as attractive. They're probably more economical, but they look really good. Like some of the hardy plank siding, it looks modern, it's durable, it's low maintenance.
I mean, we have strict
getting
no
used
hardy
a lot
plank,
now.
right? And if it's really changed, the technology has changed and the economics, I think, Medina brought up, Commissioner Atchison brought up a really good point. We should look at that and make sure that our overlay district is doing for us what we intended it to do 15 years ago and that it's updated and fresh. And darned if I didn't just think of all of that because I did work on that Sumter Road overlay district. And it's fresh in my mind, so.
Definitely update the architectural standards to provide more flexibility based upon, the advancements in building materials and things. There are a lot of really pretty building materials available now that are not just brick.
Like you said, things have changed, and I feel sorry for the cleaners. But look what they're making things out of now, polyester. How many people actually go to the dry cleaners anymore? And they're not even ironing it at home. When was the last time you opened your ironing board and set it up?
Can't go in the dryer and come out wearable, it's not being bought.
So it isn't us putting strain on those folks. And then he said, well, the most people coming in there are township residents. The township residents know that those businesses are there, but unfortunately, it's something they don't use anymore. And I don't know how to correct that, and I don't know how to help them.
And I don't know if maybe our Belleville Road Overlay District, that's done a wonderful job of putting beautiful brick buildings with lots of trees right alongside Belleville Road, hasn't unintentionally done a disservice to the mall that was built in the 80s with the far setback in the back. I mean, that's sort of what the gentleman was alluding to.
Malls in general anymore.
I understand malls in general are an issue too, but it's.
I will tell you, I go to the health food store. They were dying until Planet Fitness came in, okay? They had to move from where, Hungry Howie's is. They had to move from that location to the bigger location next to the dollar store there. They are #1 in the nation for pre-made food. I'm sorry, the state, #1, and #2 for sales. They were about to close down. I go in there, I talk to the manager. That, to me, was evidence that the traffic that Planet Fitness was bringing in helped them survive.
Most commercial centers require anchor stores in order to survive, and if they don't have it, they die.
Right, and I don't know if Planet Fitness would be considered an anchor store.
It's close, because it brings in so much, it brings in a lot of people, and that's what
There's
typical
a lot
anchor
of
stores
people
do.
there in the morning because I go by that every morning.
And the thing is, you cannot have a shopping center that is 20 to 30 years old and have it be viable today. If you drive down Ford Road in Canton, every I drive there every day. So every single strip commercial center over there, some of them are really old. They were built when Canton was originally established. All of them have retrofitted and done facade updates. And they have all gotten full because they all had dying sushi businesses. I mean, nobody even knew what was in there. You just called it Little Caesars Plaza because there was that Little Caesar thingy on top of it. Now the corner anchor is a Chipotle, and you cannot find parking in that lot because they retrofitted the building. The footprint and all is the same, but they put on some of these new buildings, and they got full tenancy. If a building looks sad and dated, it's not going to survive, at least from what I've seen.
And businesses are changing, it's changing.
In an effort of it being almost 9 o'clock, just say that if we had 6 different people come tonight to say that they need help, I think it's up to us, it's our responsibility to go back and look at those ordinances and refresh them and try to help them. We can't just let it sit the same.
Well,
That's what I heard
ordinances
tonight.
have to evolve with business,
Have to
but they're
evolve.
not necessarily causing that.
True.
Right.
Right.
But they do, it's not 100%, I agree with you completely. But we can do our due diligence to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them, is all I'm gonna say to that. But do I think that just naturally people we know it, because like you said, the prime stores or trucks are up and down, in every single neighborhood.
Right.
And as much as you tell people, shop locally, shop the brick and mortar, these are creating lots of jobs, a lot of people are not doing it. It's easier to get this stuff
I
through
was going to say,
Amazon.
the convenience
However,
factor.
The big piece of it, though, the unforeseen or unrealized ramification is jobs. There's people that are employed by small businesses. It's not the big companies that, corporations that have all these people working for them. it's the small businesses.
Shops that,
So those are our
absolutely.
residents who are working there, like the first two people that came up to the podium.
I know the gentleman made some comment about a lot of businesses going off to Canton along Michigan Avenue, the Chipotle or the Panda Express and Panera. They don't go to Canton because the process is easier or the regulations are much more lax, because I do the site plan reviews there also. They go there, yes, Patrick and I work there. They go there because of Michigan Avenue. Their market study has shown them that Michigan Avenue, it's not because we don't want to be in Van Buren, it's easier to go in Canton. No, that's not the reason. It's their market studies have shown that, okay, Michigan Avenue is the corridor we are focusing on, and that's why they bought it, for no other reason. It's not because we are difficult or
And the same thing for Ford Road,
And just so you know,
because they don't develop much along Warren Road.
The traffic.
I want you to know I appreciate the work you do in Canton as well. It's the traffic that I object to.
Yes.
gets started construction
Oh,
next
my
year,
goodness.
2025.
That's really good.
So,
I'd like to add two things. One, I want to just reiterate the special land use and temporary land use distinction is really important, because it opens up an entire conversation about the list of temporary land uses that we allow in our zoning ordinance, because they really do kind of overlay on all of our zoning districts. So when you look at the fact that there are concerts and other uses that really wouldn't even be permitted in some districts that are kind of meant to apply across the board, the conversation gets murky with respect to special land uses and permitted uses. We need to look more closely at that. But also to revert to an earlier conversation, I agree with all of the positive comments about our planning consultant. If emails and minutes spent guiding me and counseling me were air miles, then Vidi would be on Jupiter by now. So I really appreciate all the work Vidi has done, and she's a great mentor and colleague. I think we all know that, so. just wanna
I
reiterate that.
wish I could have stopped him at some point, because he not only was attacking you, he attacked us as a board.
Right.
And that bothered the hell, pardon my French, bothered the hell out of me.
I have no problem with applicants or developers disagreeing, because it's the nature of the business. You know, when you have planning requirements, it probably costs them more money. I understand, I'm sympathetic, but the zoning ordinance and rules are there for a reason. So as long as we keep it to the subject matter, it's okay. But when you start veering off into attacking boards and people, that's not the right way to do stuff.
Especially when I've been in this community and I know the history of that place.
Yeah.
I've watched that Planet Fitness building be empty for years. And I don't mean just 4 or 5 years, I mean years. That after Farmer Jack went out of business, that place sat empty.
There's a lot of buildings that were empty after Farmer
Farmer
Jack
Jack,
left.
yeah.
In Dearborn and.
That out.
in Dearborn as well, and that building stayed empty for 10 years.
Oh, Canton, the Bushes at the
Yep.
corner of Cherry Hill, that stayed vacant for 5 years, and Bushes took 4 years to open.
And most of the businesses that are in that center, they start to die off because of that reason. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Would, Mr. Chair, would the commission consider
I was
a
going to
motion
say, do we
adjourn?
have a motion for adjournment?
I would move to adjourn the meeting, sir.
Okay, do we have support?
Late dinner.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.